Overnight, fire and ice in San Antonio. Frozen hydrants forcing firefighters to truck in water. Slowing down crews as they battle flames devouring a downtown apartment complex.
I haven't been able to go to work all week long, and now everything that we have in there is gone.
Our problem is we get a little bit ahead and then the water runs out.
The need for water, a new crisis across Texas. Millions without safe drinking water, with residents in cities like Austin, Houston, and Fort Worth told to boil water before using it. And nearly half the state now facing water disruptions. Busted pipes and frozen lines snowballing into an all-out nightmare, damaging countless homes and putting many hospitals on high alert. In Austin, nurses evacuated patients after losing water pressure, then heat.
It feels like we just kind of rolled from crisis to crisis.
NBC reporter Mike Hicksonbaugh sharing his own son's frightening ordeal, rushing him to a hospital when he started choking, only to find crowds of patients waiting inside.
We spent 4 hours at the ER waiting for tests. It was jam-packed full of kids who need electrical power to power their life-saving medical equipment.
ERCOT, who runs the state power grid, stands by its decision to start rolling outages, saying if they waited even minutes, it could have been worse.
We wouldn't be sitting here talking about restoration today, tomorrow. We would be telling you that we're not sure when restoration would be done.
Texas's governor promising to investigate.
What happened this week to our fellow Texans is absolutely unacceptable and can never be replicated again.
With temperatures still stuck around freezing, safe water and food in high demand.
Trying my hardest.
Glory Ramos, one of hundreds lining up at a Fort Worth food bank. The supply's vital to help take care of her 3 kids. The family getting their power back, only to lose water.
We're doing this for them, and we need to stay strong and stay alive for them.
And this morning, Texas Senator Ted Cruz is back in the state after he was seen taking a trip to Cancun while millions battled the cold weather here. Cruz initially said that he was accompanying his daughters on a trip to Mexico. He has since expressed regret, saying that he had second thoughts the second he sat down on that plane.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.
These Texans were lucky. They never lost power during the brutal cold snap. But then they got their electric bills. Would you believe $16,000?
Who can pay that kind of money for a week's worth of electricity?
DeAndre Upshaw got a bill for almost $7,000.
Were you shocked when you saw that?
I was aghast.
Why the huge bills? Well, in Texas, the energy market is unregulated. So when demand increases, prices can skyrocket if the consumer is not on a fixed rate plan. Katrina Tanner's power bill blew up from $100 a month to $6,225.
I started panicking because I'm like, how are we going to pay bills? And, how are we going to pay this bill?
Now, Texas lawmakers say they'll step in to protect citizens from the massive bills.
This is something that's being fast-tracked that legislators are working on as we speak at this moment in time right now.
Meanwhile, the firestorm over Senator Ted Cruz's Cancun trip rages on. Some jokester hired a mariachi band to play outside his house in Houston. Cruz attempted to do damage control, handing out cases of water and serving up barbecue, while his wife Heidi was photographed in Cancun with their daughters on the beach.
Hey, what's up, Mr. Cruz?
They returned to Houston Saturday and were met at the airport by news cameras. Cruz was back at work in D.C. today, questioning Attorney General designate Merrick Garland. But it's still going to take a while to live the Cancun fiasco down, as SNL proved over the weekend.
You literally abandoned it and flew to Cancun for a family vacation.
That's right. And now I'm in a little bit of hot water, which I'm told is a thing no one in Texas has.
The deep freeze in Texas is finally over, but millions statewide now dealing with the fallout.
I don't have water again after 4 days without it because of frozen pipes.
Thousands still without power, and more than 8 million people unable to drink their water.
You know, this whole boil thing sucks, especially when you got 4 kids and 3 dogs and 2 adults in a house.
Relief is pouring in. Gilbert Gomez able to get his hands on a few days worth of water. How are you feeling?
It's just devastating. You know, we shouldn't have to live like this, you know?
Over the weekend, President Biden signing a major disaster declaration, unlocking critical federal aid for hard-hit communities. Officials in the state now targeting outrageous energy bills. The governor announcing a temporary ban on cutting off power if a customer can't pay. Houston's mayor saying this to Hoda on Sunday.
The consumer should not be made to pay the price for these exorbitant bills.
That's exactly what happened to Scott Willoughby, who signed up for wholesale prices, not knowing his rate could vary. So when the power supply went down, his bill took off. When it was all said and done, what was the damage?
$16,798, something like that.
And this was not a bill, this was withdrawn.
This was withdrawn straight from my account.
By the time Willoughby could switch providers, he ended up paying 80 times more than his typical $200 bill. Some well-known Texans now pitching in to help. Beto O'Rourke driving a truck of water from El Paso to Austin. Senator Ted Cruz serving firefighters barbecue after flying back from Cancun. Even Houston-born Beyonce offering emergency funding on her website. Texans looking out for their own, even on South Padre Island, where all those cold-stunned sea turtles were warmed up enough to return to sea.
Now, in addition to restoring power and water, there's the growing question of food. We have seen those heartbreaking scenes of grocery store shelves that are still bare today. So to combat that, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has actually loosened regulations to allow kitchens to prepare more meals and put more trucks on the road to deliver them.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.
While power has come back to millions of Texans who suffered through freezing cold temperatures for days, the crisis is not over yet. More than 190,000 homes were still without electricity on Friday morning, while 13 million people, that's nearly half of all Texans, have experienced disruptions in water service, leading some to go out and search for bottled water.
I feel like we shouldn't be going through this.
Many arrived to stores with long lines and empty shelves. Hospitals in some hard-hit areas ran out of water and transferred patients elsewhere, while millions of people were ordered to boil water to make it safe for drinking. Water treatment plants were knocked offline this week, potentially allowing harmful bacteria to proliferate. The historic winter storm has paralyzed the state, causing an array of damage amid 5 days of blackouts. Ice that downed power lines during the week and other issues have utility workers scrambling to reconnect homes to power, while others deal with burst pipes, including Cypress resident Noel Zepeda. Water gushed from the ceiling above the master bedroom of his home, drenching his bed. Meanwhile, Thursday in San Antonio, a blaze engulfed an apartment building. The fire started around 1 p.m. and burned for hours as firefighters struggled to bring it under control due to frozen hydrants, according to local media. Nearly 24 deaths have been attributed to the cold snap. Officials say they suspect many more people have died, but their bodies have not yet been discovered.
Right now in Texas, nearly 3 million families are trapped in their homes in freezing temperatures without power. For many of them, it's been that way for 4 days now. And the situation may get even more dire with another round of dangerous weather expected. More than 24 deaths have been attributed to the weather so far. At least 2 of those deaths were because of carbon monoxide poisoning involving people sitting in their running cars, just presumably trying to warm up. Across the state, we are seeing multiple reports of just how desperate folks are getting in Texas. Stories like this one from the Texas Tribune. A grandmother sleeps in her car to stay warm. Parents who ran out of firewood burned belongings to keep their children warm. A Richardson resident watched the battery level of her partner's oxygen machine drain away and desperately sought help to have it recharged. NBC's Morgan Chesky is one of the millions of people experiencing this firsthand. He is live for us in Dallas, where temperatures are not expected to get above freezing again today. Morgan, first, are we getting any sense of when these families may finally get their power back on? What are officials saying?
Officials are saying the same thing they've been saying over about the past 24 hours, Craig, at least related to the power grid, and that is they're working very hard to restore full power, but at this point there is no definitive timetable as to when it will be fully restored, and they say that rolling outages will continue. However, I feel like it's very important to note these rolling outages for so many Texans across the entire state have not been several hours on, several hours off, but several minutes on, and then days off. Spoke to a gentleman yesterday who had to move his wife through the snow to a neighbor's home after the thermostat inside their house read 38 degrees. Their neighbor, one of the only people they knew with a fireplace that they could huddle in front of to try and stay warm. It is heartbreaking to hear from so many people across this state doing whatever they can to try to survive at this point in time. It's also sad to say that this is the warmest day we've had in several days, Craig, and it's about 19 degrees right now. We may not break freezing until Friday. That will really be the first chance for widespread solutions to be put into place to bring some of these power suppliers back online. We know that natural gas lines froze that provide power to a lot of areas. We know that in West Texas, there was an issue with those wind turbines. Ice buildup on the blades, and the batteries that store energy were drained even faster as a result of this cold snap that's really turned into an absolute crisis. Craig?
Meanwhile, Morgan, yesterday we learned a little bit more about your personal situation. You mentioned your grandmother was at a nursing home facility that lost power. Does she have her power back on?
I appreciate you asking. Grandmother is doing okay today. Several hours later in the afternoon, her power was restored. My mother's power was also restored for the first time in about 36 hours. They are in Houston right now, which is facing so many issues. People there are having pipes burst. We saw one photo, Craig, of someone that had left their faucet running, and it actually froze inside their house. That is what they're dealing with in Houston. Temperatures slightly warmer there than we are here in Austin, here in Dallas, rather. But no matter where you look across the entire state, you'll find similar stories to that. And that's what makes it so tough, especially when we don't know when the power is going to be fully restored. My own place last night dipping to about 45 degrees. And so, you know, you can build a fire in a fireplace, but it's not going to do much.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.
Acting FEMA Administrator Bob Fenton joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Fenton. What are you doing at this point in time? What is FEMA doing on the ground in Texas right now?
Yeah, Anthony, we have teams and resources supporting Texas with things like fuel, water, meals, blankets, and other supply items to support the population there that's been in the cold for almost a week now.
Yeah, and temperatures are expected to drop back into the teens tonight. What has you most worried?
Well, what has me most worried is making sure that people stay warm. Texas has set up a number of places, shelters that they could go, warming stations where people could go. So if you're cold, don't stay in your house. Go to one of the warming stations.
Governor Abbott has asked President Biden to declare a major disaster declaration in Texas. How would that impact your ability to provide relief? Can you do more with that?
Yeah, so the president declared an emergency declaration leaning forward this weekend. That provided me the ability to direct the federal government resources, so all federal agencies to support the state of Texas. In addition to that, it provided me the ability to reimburse some costs to Texas for this response. The major declaration that the governor is requesting now allows me to not only do more things to repair permanent infrastructure, but also the ability to help individuals. So we're just got that this morning, and we'll be evaluating that and meeting with the president here to discuss it later on today.
When you say help individuals, what do you mean? What can you do?
Well, first, individuals should start with their insurance. That's the critical way that individuals, the quickest way and the best way to make yourself whole is through insurance. So we recommend that if you have insurance, go through that. Our individual assistance program supplements things like insurance to either help you with uncovered costs or other costs to make your home habitable. In addition to that, SBA is typically made available in disasters, and that is another form of assistance through low-interest loans that could help individuals.
Has the pandemic in any way limited your ability to get relief to Texas?
No, the pandemic hasn't eliminated it. If anything, I've had staff there from the pandemic as we were in the process of opening many community vaccine centers across many states. So I've had staff there working on those. In fact, we are still hopeful to set up some 3 community vaccine centers next week in Houston, Dallas, and Arlington. So it allowed me to have staff there already to start responding to this.
Bob Fenton, thank you very much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it. Acting FEMA Administrator.
Thank you.
The president is juggling this crisis in Texas with a number of other issues. News Nation correspondent Michael Shore takes a look at how he's handling the disaster.
A brutal winter storm pulling attention from President Biden and forcing the still new president to take up the comforter-in-chief role in a time of disaster. With that comes the need to send federal aid to a beleaguered and still freezing Texas. Biden asking acting FEMA Administrator Bob Fenton on Friday to upgrade the disaster.
This afternoon, I'm going to ask him to accelerate our response and request for, quote, it's a different declaration, a major disaster declaration.
And on Saturday, the president approved that major disaster declaration in Texas, releasing federal relief across 77 counties and leaving room for more. In a statement, the White House saying, assistance can include grants for temporary housing and home repairs, low-cost loans to cover uninsured property losses, and other programs to help individuals and business owners recover from the effects of the disaster. With unity intended by Biden to be a hallmark of his presidency, the Texas disaster has brought the Democratic administration to a place of working with a Republican governor, Greg Abbott, in Texas. Abbott releasing a statement today thanking the president for what he called, quote, partial assistance. I thank President Biden for his assistance as we respond to impacts of winter weather across our state.
But the reality is, in crisis, there can be opportunity.
Politico reporter Mark Caputo says that disaster can also be about politics.
And for Joe Biden, who not only wants to show that he's competent and that he is willing to do what it takes to help the most people most effectively, he does want to showcase that unity. He does want to show that he's able to work across the aisle and get things done.
On Thursday, the president tweeted a photo of his phone call with Abbott.
The relationship between Abbott and Biden and how they work together is going to be something we should watch very closely over the coming days.
When you have a disaster like this, it can just set people back for years.
And with Democrats like New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez visiting the state after raising over $3 million in relief, and prominent Texas Democrats Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke spearheading relief efforts themselves, the politics can't be ignored. But the president saying Friday, when asked when he will visit Texas, that he does not want to be a distraction.
If, in fact, it's concluded that I can do it without creating a burden for the folks on the ground while they're dealing with this crisis, I plan on going. But we'll know that. We'll make that decision probably the beginning of next week.
Michael Schur, News Nation, Los Angeles.
Due to extremely cold temperatures, we've seen power outages in areas like Texas and Oklahoma. Areas as close as Kansas City have been implementing rolling blackouts to conserve energy.
Yeah, but we don't have to worry about our energy supply. Fox News' Catherine Hessel explains why, and a story all new at 10.
Extremely cold temperatures has put Texas and Oklahoma in a power crisis, leaving millions of people without electricity. But why? Spire, Missouri President Scott Carter explains.
And so what we've seen in that Texas-Oklahoma region is really two things that's happened. Wind and solar haven't worked when it got extremely cold. So wind turbines froze up and then the solar panels get covered with snow. And then what also happens is the natural gas wells that get natural gas will do what they call freezing up, and they won't be able to produce natural gas.
Spire used to use a natural gas pipeline that tapped into sources from the southern region. Then in 2018, they started building a different pipeline that went north and east and lets them pull from different supply bases.
What the Spire STL pipeline did was allowed us to go north and interconnect with what's called REX, Rockies Express Pipeline. And that pipeline runs east and west over to the Rockies and then over into the mid-Atlantic area.
Because of the new pipeline that was finished in November of 2019, Spire has not had any problems getting natural gas to our region, and it's helping keep customers' bills down.
So we're able to bring gas in off of that pipeline at about a quarter what it would cost us to tap traditional supply sources like Oklahoma.
Texas relies heavily on natural gas energy to power electric. So when those wells froze, they didn't have more options to turn to. Ameren, Missouri's VP of Operations and Technical Services, Kevin Anders, says that's not the case here. Ameren has a broad generation portfolio.
You know, we've got a lot of different technologies, and so if any one, whether it's wind or solar or hydro or natural gas or coal, isn't, you know, maybe exposed and not operating as well as it could, we have, you know, a number of different other ones that are available to us. And so we're not just so concentrated in any one of those technologies that we're exposed to being short on generation.
He says Kansas City is on the same regional transmission grid as Texas and Oklahoma, so they're feeling the effects of what's happening there. For a few days, Ameren, Missouri was watching the voltage numbers and preparing for a rolling blackout if needed. But on Monday, they asked customers to conserve energy, and customers responded.
The difference in the amount of energy that we had to provide for our customers yesterday was much less than it was on Monday. And today is another another step in the right direction in that regard.
Ameren is asking customers to continue to conserve through Friday. Reporting, I'm Catherine Hessel.
Local plumbers have had their hands full with bursting and frozen pipes, and unfortunately, it's a problem that will only get worse over the next couple of days. Dana Morris joins us now to explain. Dana.
Well, Crystal, you're right. The problem is some people may not even realize that they have a bursted pipe or water leak situation because it could be held together by ice. But once that ice melts over the next couple of days, it may become a big mess. And for some, unfortunately, a mess may be too generous of a description. Just ask Jill Tarango.
Kids were home. They're like, Mom, the roof is leaking. And we're like, what?
A 15-year resident of Odessa, Tarango says after a water line she didn't even know about started leaking from the attic, her house quickly became a disaster zone.
Caused a lot of damage. Like I said, it went into the walls. It ruined our floor. It went into our ceiling fans, you know, so there's a lot more that goes with it. Plus, we have a big hole in the ceiling right now.
Thankfully, she says, a handy husband and quick action were able to prevent things from getting worse. Though across Texas, some situations make Tarango's situation look like just another mess. And unfortunately, plumbers say every homeowner needs to be aware of their plumbing over the next couple of days.
Once they start thawing out, anything that was broken and held shut with the ice, once it starts thawing out, yeah, they'll start leaking.
Now, the first thing to do if you have a water leak or a burst pipe is to turn your water off to prevent any further damage. So you're going to need to find your water meter, which my water meter and probably your water meter is located in the alley and looks something like this. So once you've located it, you just need to pop the top off. You can do it with something similar to a screwdriver. Now, once inside, you'll notice you have your water meter here and your water line valve right here. You'll notice there are two circles. To turn it off, you just line them up. Once your water is off, it's time to assess the damage, contact your plumber and insurance.
I think you just take it one step at a time. You can't fix it right away, or you can't go back and reverse it. Don't stress out. Just, assess the problem and take it step by step.
And wait times for plumbers were already starting to add up here in the Permian Basin. You're probably already looking at about a week, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But if more and more calls start coming in, you can expect those wait times to increase. But then again, more help could be on the way. That's because Governor Greg Abbott approved a process yesterday that will allow out-of-state plumbers and out-of-state insurance adjusters to apply for temporary licenses in the state of Texas, and as well as any plumbers that may have an expired license due to not doing their continuing education, they can also apply for a temporary license. So stay warm and stay safe, West Texas, and get those plumbing problems fixed. Reporting in Odessa, Dana Morris, News West 9.
Tonight, the end of the Texas deep freeze, turning one crisis into another.
Getting multiple calls saying that the roof is on fire.
Overnight, flames tore through a Killeen hotel. The fire made even worse by a failed sprinkler system, damaged when it froze. The water issue still impacting more than 14 million Texans, now forced to boil or find bottled water till supply is deemed safe.
We don't have any drinking water, any flushing water, any washing water, any water. I need the water pretty badly.
Today, President Biden approved an emergency disaster declaration offering grants for temporary housing and loans to repair property damage for 77 hard-hit counties. But Texas officials say it's not enough.
Governor Abbott asked for a major disaster declaration for all 254 Texas counties for both individual assistance and public assistance.
This is what Bantu Segal and his wife Paulina came home to, a burst pipe flooding their downstairs.
Water went into those walls, and our biggest worry is mold for our kids, with anything with moisture related.
The couple unaware of the damage until they got home from the hospital, where both worked long hours treating patients, many who lost power for slips and accidents on ice.
We can land spaceships on Mars, but we can't figure out how to get energy to communities in Texas. It's quite frustrating.
Frustration shared statewide. With the extreme weather, energy prices soared. Now residents who had power reporting energy bills in the thousands. The governor holding an emergency meeting tonight to address it. In Austin, nearly 40% of the city lost power for multiple days.
This is a catastrophic failure.
A catastrophic cost, too. The freeze on its way to surpassing Hurricane Harvey as the state's costliest weather event in history. For the millions still without water and countless others picking up the pieces, help can't come fast enough.
And Morgan joins us now from Dallas. Morgan, any idea when this water disaster will be resolved?
Yeah, Jose, even with millions facing those compromised water supplies, it is important to note progress is being made. Local communities are lifting those boil notices by the hour. Jose?
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
Is this really America? People lining up at outdoor pipes for fresh water.
No power, no heat, freezing temperatures. It's a deadly combination. Texas has been in the grip of a disaster that has affected the lives of millions of people over the past 5 days. Now that same storm system has moved to the northeast, bringing with it more snow, freezing rain, and power blackouts.
Texas remains the hardest hit. People shopping for their families are shivering in long lines. The biggest challenge is keeping warm. The Wired family is eating and sleeping in their car and live streaming their plight with their kids, little Nathan and Timmy, keeping up their spirits.
Cooking on the barbecue in the backyard.
Barbecue in the back and then you get back in the car.
Yeah.
We're cooking the old-fashioned way, doing it like the cowboys in the Wild West. Yep.
I spoke with Jameson Michael, who is keeping a sense of humor about his very cramped quarters.
Over here, we have the dining area. So, I put my food, my plate over there if I have any food, my Cheez-Its, my Quest bars. And the back is, where it goes down. That's where we take long naps.
Some heroes have stepped up in the midst of the crisis. The owners of this food truck gave away 2,400 tacos to Houston families without a hot meal in days.
If I was in that situation, I wish someone would do the same for me.
Travis Herzog, chief meteorologist of KTRK-TV in Houston, says the big freeze will be over soon.
This is winter's version of a Texas hurricane. We have never faced anything like this across our state. The power's out, the water isn't working, and the amount of suffering is unbelievable. It's going to be a few more days before we thaw out and things get back to something that resembles normal.
More areas in Central Texas have clean water to drink in their homes tonight.
You can see on this map on your screen, the boil water notice was lifted for those areas in green, Central, South, North, and Northwest A pressure zones.
This gives some residents hope for more normality as the winter storms last week are now gone. KVU's Madi Salazar joins us live from a water distribution site in Southwest Austin this afternoon.
Madi, volunteers still working hard to hand out bottles of water to people who need it.
Brian, Terry, a lot of people that I talked to say that getting that lifted boil water notice has been an amazing feeling, and I know that we can all relate to that. But as things slowly get back to normal, there are people that still need water, and there are water distribution sites that will give you that.
Just very grateful to get water into the hands of people who need it.
It's been nonstop for JJ Plasencio. He's been volunteering since last week, trying to help people during the power and water outages.
It's a beautiful thing. There's something about giving back to others.
More and more areas in Austin are getting clean water after having to boil it since last Wednesday, giving Central Texans like Lauren Wolf some peace of mind.
And then had to research how long to let my faucets run to flush them out, and now I've dumped out my ice maker. So slowly getting back to normal, and this was the last piece of the puzzle.
The city of Austin continues to offer water distribution sites, one of them at Austin Community College's Pinnacle campus. Folks at the site say on Sunday they gave out 3,000 packs of water. On Monday, they say lines at the campus have slowed down a bit. Austin City Council member Paige Ellis hopes that's a sign that people are getting what they need.
Southwest Austin was the first to go offline and get the boil water notice. We've been the last to come back online. It is just so really nice to get to talk to people and to have them say thank you for giving water, and the volunteers couldn't be any more amazing.
Austin Water says they hope by this time tomorrow all the boil water notices will be lifted.
Tonight, many people in Southwest Austin are dealing with a double dose of hardship: no power and no water.
Jennifer Sanders explains how they're getting through.
Yeah, it's easy. Just take a picture and dip it.
It's the start of a new routine at the Southwest Austin apartment complex. Brian is going on 84 hours without power and now no water.
I'm getting water from the pool to add to the toilet, to flush the toilet because the water's been cut off.
The unprecedented cold triggering pipe bursts and water outages in almost every part of Austin. The stories are endless.
It's very scary. I have a family of 5, so it feels a little nerve-wracking to have to deal with this and replenish our toilets.
They put us on a boil notice, but you can't get anything out of the faucet to boil. And the little bit I have in the tub, I've boiled a couple of pots to try to catch up on stuff, but face it, that's a losing battle.
All of them hoping to get a restoration timeline from Austin Water.
It's really difficult to give precise timelines for portions of our system. We don't know what we don't know. And we don't know where leaks are.
The agency says it will be a, quote, multi-day process to restore pressure and service. This Austin water leaks map showing about 17 leaks repaired in the last day. That's in green, about 24 pending repair in red, and almost a dozen in blue pending inspection.
Our priority is our central pressure district, which serves the core of the city, a good part of East Austin and areas south of the river.
Austin Water says that will be a phased approach. Until then, it wants customers to plan for days rather than hours without water. Jennifer Sanders, KXAN News.
We asked Austin Water again tonight how many customers are without water and what areas are most affected. We inquired about the multi-day restoration timeline. The agency said, quote, "We do not have additional information at this time." Earlier today, the director of Austin Water said tens of thousands remain without water or have low water pressure. He said the risk for contamination is low, but it's still important to boil water before consuming it.
See that? There it goes.
Even as Texas starts to thaw.
Can you see it here? I'm just going to throw it on the pool.
The hard times could linger for millions, still without safe, drinkable water in their homes.
We actually were enjoying the snow for a while. Now all of a sudden our wood is running low and ration our water, and maybe this isn't
survival mode.
Yeah, survival mode. Maybe this is going to last a little longer than we thought.
Former Toronto resident Jill Amory and her family live in Austin. They were prepared for the deep freeze.
We're not quite up to doing the polar bear plunge here. We'll wait till we get back to Canada to do that.
But could have never predicted the electricity crisis that followed.
We lost our power on Wednesday morning at about 5:30. We heard a big pop down the street. So we just regained power about 7:30 this morning.
This week's killer cold plunged the state into darkness for days, shutting down water treatment plants and causing pipes to freeze and burst, damaging thousands of homes. Some residents have been forced to harvest shovelfuls of snow to flush their toilets.
You get a whole tub of snow, but then it's actually just a little bit of water. So we try to come up with new ways of like collecting the water melt, the snow melt, which is outside, and just trying to get creative with what we can use.
And shortages left firefighters scrambling for water.
We do know that from a claim standpoint, however, this is going to be one of the most significant claims events that we have seen here in the state of Texas.
About 14 million Texans are being warned about the water coming out of their taps and have been told to boil it for the next few days.
You should be seeing a noticeable improvement in your water pressure. Let's hope and pray for the best. I'll still stand about Monday.
The Amorys say they're grateful the heat is back on, that they can take showers again, and that they had the means to survive.
We were fortunate. You know, there's so many people that didn't have what we had, and we were feeling for them.
This is a drone view of hundreds of cars lining up for bottled water at a distribution site in the Houston area. Now, President Joe Biden has approved a major disaster declaration, unlocking more resources and assistance. Karen Ciolin, City News.
Every source of power that the state of Texas has been compromised. Coal generated power, access to gas generated power also have been compromised.
An admission by the governor of Texas, the state that ironically calls itself the energy capital of the world, yet one laid catastrophically low as severe winter storms swept through, toppling the state's power grid and leaving millions of families without heat or safe drinking water. More than 30 have died in extreme cold across America's south, but Texas has been hit by far the hardest.
The houses start getting real cold, and then we got all the blankets out. We tried to all sleep together to keep us warm, come to the cars to keep our phones charged, and then today when we got up, there was no water.
It's pretty bad that, you know, as Texans, we just can't prepare for cold. And every other part of the country, this would have not been even an issue.
He's right, and that's because the rest of the country has its power sources interconnected, so supply can go where it's needed the most. But Texas made the decision to be energy independent, in part to escape regulation. That's worked up till now, but the severity of the storms this time, many believe a function of climate change, has proven too much.
This shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America.
The state's Republican governor tried to blame a proposed left-wing green energy plan, not even yet in existence, for the state's power freeze. But the Democratic reaction was swift.
There's been complete Republican control of the state of Texas for 20 years. And so the decision to deregulate our electricity grid in the first place, nor to connect to the rest of the national grid so that we can draw down power we need it. These are all decisions made by Greg Abbott and other statewide elected Republicans.
As they bickered over the politics, the human cost laid bare. In the city of Sugar Land, a mother and her children were killed in a house fire.
They had started a fire in the fireplace, or whether they were using candles. We just don't know.
Others died inhaling carbon monoxide fumes after running the engine of their car to keep warm. This family forced to build a fire on their porch as their 7 children, including an 11-month-old baby, huddled inside the van.
We're just hoping that the lights will come back soon enough, because it's really freezing. It's horrible.
But it wasn't just humans suffering. In the normally warm waters off the coast of Texas, thousands of sea turtles were stunned by the freeze, washed ashore and hurriedly rescued. But it was to warmer climes that Ted Cruz, one of the state's controversial Republican senators, fled, seen here boarding a flight to Cancun with his family, even as the crisis on his own doorstep deepened.
You know, it's just unbelievable. And just when I think Ted Cruz couldn't disappoint Texans more, he finds a new way to do it.
Cruz later claimed he was only flying his kids there for a holiday and would return today. Adding to the misery, frozen pipes forced millions to boil tap water. 500,000 Texans were still without power Thursday morning, the victims of an energy strategy designed to isolate them from the very power failure that's laid them low. Now the big question, was this simply a one-off extreme event or a taste of things to come?
Boil water orders are in place for nearly all of Southeast Texas. Hampshire, Fannett, and Deweyville are the latest to make those advisories this morning. There are now so many that we can't list them all, but you can get an updated list by texting the word water to 409-838-1212, and we will send that information straight to your phone. Now, here are some tips if you do have to boil your water. You want to heat the water until bubbles come up from the bottom of the pot. Once it reaches a rolling boil, let it boil for another 2 minutes. Once the water cools down, it's good to drink and use to cook with. And here are some do's and don'ts. Do not use your ice from the ice makers. That's from the tap. You can bathe and take a shower, just don't swallow the water. Don't brush your teeth with that tap water and use bottled water instead. Use your washer because that's okay. And dishwashers are okay too. Just make sure you turn on the high temperature or heat dry feature. Bursting pipes only expected to get worse as our temperatures continue to go up and down. Ice has more volume than water, so when water freezes inside of a pipe, it expands and increases pressure. That pressure needs to go somewhere, so it literally bursts right out of the pipe. And if it happens to you, getting help right now isn't easy. Here's William Joy.
They woke me up this morning saying that we were flooded. You know, this is a lot.
Marie Wilbanks feels forgotten.
And I was just sitting in there just a minute ago. I'm thinking, how can I get the rest of it out?
She's been without power for more than 24 hours, and this morning a burst pipe flooded her apartment where she's been taking care of her granddaughter and great-granddaughter.
I try so hard to give her and her baby a good place to live. And now all of this.
Across Texas, pipes have frozen, burst, and flooded homes. All are asking the same question.
Why me?
Well, right now it's nonstop phone calls.
David Butler is the master plumber at Milestone.
You know, I think we'd have been all right if we wouldn't have the power outages as bad.
They're making 150 calls a day and are already booked through Tuesday. His best advice to those with frozen pipes is to turn off water now. If you can, keep trickling faucets.
As it gets up freezing and above freezing, it's just going to be exponentially worse.
Texans are hurting.
I've tried to get in touch with Encore. I've tried to get in touch with my electric company. Nobody won't answer.
As the cold ends, many will need help facing a new fight.
And I'm like, one more battle, but I can make it because I've been through so many.
In Fort Worth, I'm William Joy.
As residents continue to recover from the storm that hit more than a week and a half ago, food, clean water, even household repairs are in huge demand. The American Red Cross is on the ground throughout the state working with local partners to help.
Joining us from Dallas, Texas with an update on the relief efforts, we have Dan Halliburton from the American Red Cross. Good morning to you, Dan. Thanks for being here.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having us.
So, Dan, first and foremost, just kind of give us a recap because you are in Dallas right now. You have boots on the ground. What is it like right now compared to a week ago?
Well, it's amazing. It's 70 degrees warmer today as our high compared to a week ago. So, you know, that's a huge plus. But we've got a lot of trouble, a lot of challenges for people in their homes that were so devastated by the flooding that happened when all the pipes burst.
Yeah, I can speak personally about that. My parents still live there in the Arlington area, and they had a pipe burst in their home. The whole first floor was flooded. The problem, though, Dan, is getting people out to do the insurance inspections and get the repairs. Is that line long?
Well, there's a real challenge with that. Always when we see a disaster this magnitude, getting a hold of your insurance company, finding contractors to do the work that's done. Sometimes people just have to move forward if they're able in making those repairs until they can get with their insurance people. But the basic needs are what we're really focused on with the Red Cross, things that people need right now.
Yeah, so give me some examples of what that is. We know that there were millions of people that didn't have power, right, which then affected their heat and it affected their hot water as well. Water became such a big issue. I can't believe we're even discussing this in 2021, just such an infrastructure problem. What communities have been hit hardest and what are you doing for them?
Well, certainly the Texas Gulf Coast and up into central Texas, we're far more dramatically impacted than North Texas. We were a little luckier. We had more snow than ice. There are differences in the way homes are built in North Texas to South Texas. It's 5.5 hours from Dallas to Houston.
Yep.
So it gives you an idea of the geography. What people need is water. The Red Cross has water on the ground, more water on the way. I'm kind of imagining the picture of 100,000 meals ready to eat on the way in, being trucked in, trailer loads of water. And yesterday I was here in Dallas at distribution centers where we're handing out water to folks who might need it in the area, you know, from everything to personal hygiene to flushing a toilet.
So how can we help up here in New York? We're far away, but obviously, you know, a lot of folks still want to help those Americans in need. How can we make a difference in this?
Well, there's a couple things that can be done. Certainly financial donations help the Red Cross with its life-saving mission, not only for this widespread disaster, but others that are unfortunately ahead of us. And you can find out about that if you go to 1-800-RED-CROSS, make that call, or go to redcross.org.
But can it be specifically directed to the Dallas, the Texas region?
You can direct your donations there to Texas. It's one large operation for the Red Cross. And I like to tell people, if you can make a donation to disaster relief, that means that not only will you help with this disaster, but you could help with the folks that, a flood that's ahead or a tornado. Our disasters are never ending, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So when you make those donations, it always helps.
Yeah, I know you're also partnering with several community groups as well, right? Because the community groups are the ones who really know the area so well. Who are you working with?
Well, it's a wide range of organizations. This one seems to be very, very local. We're working with a lot of local churches, a lot of local community organizations, certainly with cities and governments, as we always do. So I kind of always paint it as it's like a patchwork quilt of help. And we patch it all together with Red Cross and all of our community partners. And that's what really makes it.
Has your response been different? Because, I've covered a number of storms on the East Coast, and you guys were always on site, right? And I would visit where you'd have these large-scale shelters that would be in a high school gymnasium. Obviously, we're in the age of COVID, so everything looks and feels a little different. How has that impacted your operation?
Well, we've still got our warming centers up and operating because people's homes aren't habitable, so they need a place to go, maybe get a shower, certainly get meals and snacks. And we've had 52,000 meals and snacks go out. COVID-19 is an issue. We've been very well versed on that with other disasters up till now. So when we do work in a congregate situation, we've got all of our protocols online, and we've done a very good job on that, I think.
Quickly, give us an indication. How many people are still in these shelters because they simply can't get back into their homes?
Well, I think there's about a little over 100. The overnight numbers are coming in about a little over 100 warming shelters. Those numbers really come and go because some people are going home. They might sleep at home at night, but they're coming back in the day for services. This really reminds me of the aftermath of a hurricane, even the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, where, we had with a storm, and I worked Hurricane Sandy, and then it got really cold. So that part was miserable. Today, though, it's going to get warm, and that makes the progress much quicker.
Absolutely. But it's good work that you're doing there on the ground, important work, especially in the lives of the folks who, it's really, their homes and everything has been turned upside down in this. Dan, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
Stay safe to you and your team. And by the way, to support the American Red Cross and other organizations with relief in Texas, you can meet us online.
If you're planning a grocery store run because you're out of milk or you need water, check ahead. H-E-B's San Antonio stores closed for the day just a few minutes ago, but they plan to open tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. Some closures, though, are still possible. 12 on your side's Marilyn Moritz on what to expect as H-E-B weathers the snow and replenishes the shelves.
Even as the snow falls, people are standing in line waiting for the store to open. We need groceries. We need food. Out of food, many out of power, and Nicole Wingfield out of water for 2 days.
I have to get water for our 1-year-old because we got to be able to make her food. At this point, I'm desperate. We've boiled all the snow that we had.
Despite wicked weather, H-E-B has most stores open. Hours are shortened and some items in short supply.
Obviously, the biggest one, with a majority of the state being under a water boil, is obviously bottled water.
H-E-B's Julie Bedingfield says they are working around the clock to stock water and more. At some stores last night, shoppers found certain shelves cleaned out. To meet needs, H-E-B has purchase limits on milk, bread, eggs, ice, even brisket and propane tanks, and bottled water. H-E-B says the weather caused a severe disruption to the food supply chain. Not only trucks traveling on ice, but water and power outages causing issues with warehousing, manufacturing, stores, and employees. For now, curbside pickup and home delivery is temporarily canceled.
Customers will continue to see those shelves replenished. And, we ask customers obviously to only buy what they need at this time. Like we said, we're really hoping conditions start improving over the next few days and that we're back to what we call normal, hopefully by next week.
Weather permitting, next week. Marilyn Moritz, KSAT 12 News.
Electricity is back on for most Texas residents, but the winter blast has now left millions with unprecedented storm damage. Massive electricity bills, broken water pipes, and flooding is expected to cause huge insurance claims and could leave many in financial turmoil. Janet Shamlian has more from Houston.
I thought, oh God, not again. I can't do this again.
Tabitha Charlton was playing cards with her twin daughters last week when she heard a pipe burst.
And my ceiling just caved in their bedroom. I don't know what to do.
There was just water shooting out of the ceiling, just shooting down on everything.
Now the song and dance with her insurance company, a process she's all too familiar with. Charlton's home also flooded during 2017's Hurricane Harvey. Those claims settled just 12 days ago.
When this happened, I walked out my front door and I fell to my knees and I sobbed. Dealing with the insurance company is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. I can deal with the damage. That could be fixed. But another 3.5-year battle with the insurance company, I don't have it in me.
The price tag for this storm could surpass Harvey's $19 billion in insurance losses. The problem many Texans are now facing, getting estimates for their damage. And there's no standardization across insurance policies. The Texas Department of Insurance suggests filing your claims as soon as possible, taking photos of damage, and waiting to make permanent repairs until speaking with the insurance company. Otherwise, they may not pay.
How do you put a price tag on what I've spent and my time?
As for Charlton, she says she agreed to receive less than half of the more than $300,000 she's spent in Harvey repairs. And she still hasn't received a check.
I was so close. And now it's all over again.
You won't leave.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I honestly don't. We just want our home to be our home and not have to walk through the house. And every time we see something, it's a reminder of years of grief and trauma and fighting.
Tabitha Charlton's house is unlivable for the second time in 3.5 years. She and her twin daughters are staying with a neighbor, at least for now. Now, in terms of President Biden's disaster declaration for Texas, or at least 77 counties in Texas, that will free up some funding, and it will be grants intended for home repair and temporary housing. But Anne Marie, the problem is at this point, homeowners don't know how much they can expect to get. Meanwhile, they are counting the losses. It's a very challenging situation, especially in communities that have suffered from Harvey.
Yeah, you know, you're talking about Harvey. I was watching your story and having flashbacks of Superstorm Sandy, where a lot of homeowners, you know, fought for years with insurance companies. And, you know, insurance companies would say, well, this damage is caused by wind and you're not covered for wind, or this is caused by flooding and you don't have flood insurance. And it was just a constant battle for many. The Insurance Council of Texas is asking residents to be patient. But, you know, your story shows just how long it can take to get any sort of resolution. How are people responding?
So the flip side of the Insurance Council saying be patient is Tabitha Charlton, because what she says is that these insurance companies want to wear you down. You know, they keep you on the hook for so long. Year one passes, year two passes, and at this point, you just want to get some cash flow going. She says she spent $300,000 in repairs, and she settled 12 days ago. Just a few days before this winter storm, she settled for about half of what she spent. So be patient, Anne-Marie, kind of can cut both ways.
Exactly, because, you know, it's not just the financial toll. I think more than anything, it's sort of the emotional toll. It's just so grinding. You want your home to be a place of peace. And, you know, when you go back and it's still a disaster zone day after day, you just want to get it done. Give me a sort of snapshot of where things are, you know, where you are right now, because we see kind of all these, you know, we see different stories, lots of video, but what's happening?
Well, let me give you a little more perspective about what you said. I think it's a very important point, and that is the emotional toll. So Tabitha has 7-year-old twin daughters. They don't want to go back to the house. I mean, that is your sanctuary, right? And they are frightened, so they don't want to go back to the house. But in terms of what's happening here in Houston, which is, you know, where I live and have lived for many years, I think it's a little bit of shell shock what's going on here. The grocery store shelves are still largely empty. I will say most people have power now, and most people have water, if not full strength water. And Houston lifted its boil water order last night. So while that all sounds good, I think that we are kind of just emerging from this fog that was the winter storm of last week, Anne-Marie.
Oh, man, oh, man. I mean, it looks great where you are. I just feel for the people of Texas. Janet, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to begin tonight with breaking news on that dangerous deep freeze now gripping half the country. The record-breaking Arctic temperatures, snow and ice have killed at least a dozen people nationwide and left more than 3 million more without power, mostly in places that just aren't used to dealing with the bitter cold. In parts of Texas and Oklahoma, temperatures haven't been this low in 100 years, causing pipes to freeze and then explode and taxing an electrical grid not designed to heat tens of millions of homes. The winter weather has also forced vaccination centers to close and is now delaying new doses from being shipped out across the country. Well, as we come on the air, things are only getting worse. Tonight, actually, 27 states are under new winter storm warnings, bracing for a second round of dangerous cold, snow and ice that will soon move across hard-hit Texas and into the Northeast. So we have a lot of news tonight for you and your family. CBS's Lonnie Quinn is standing by with the forecast, and our team of correspondents is covering the other major headlines. CBS's Omar Villafranca is going to lead off our coverage from just north of Dallas. Good evening, Omar.
Power has been on and off here for a few days. Combine that with freezing temperatures, and this is what buildings all across Texas are dealing with. Pipes busted by frozen water. Tonight, the South is frozen solid. States struggling to recover from punishing sub-zero temperatures with more wicked weather on the way. The extreme conditions blamed for at least 17 deaths. Medical examiners in Galveston requesting a refrigerated truck after reports of several cold weather-related deaths. Texas's governor calling the storm the winter version of Hurricane Harvey. Over 3 million Texans are still without power because the state's grid can't keep up with the demand, and millions more are subject to rolling blackouts, some as long as 30 hours. Residents using blow dryers and heaters to thaw their frozen pipes.
No water.
The situation is so bad, Tara Davis is leaving the state after she, her husband, and her 8-month-old baby had to huddle around the fireplace to stay warm. They went without power for 30 hours.
It was -2 degrees last night. We had our daughter wrapped up in as many pieces of clothing as we possibly could, but we were really scared.
42, 44.
In Houston, more than 50 cars lined up in search of a warm meal outside a Burger King. Dylan Fluster took his 15-month-old and a 3-year-old to a warming station in Plano.
When we woke up this morning and it was still no power, it was like, can't keep doing this.
Texas is the only state in the continental U.S. that has its own power grid. It's not regulated by the federal government, and tonight, people are angry that it's failed.
I understand people are very angry that this has happened, and I'd say let us get the power back on.
Omar Villafranca, CBS News, Plano, Texas.
Power has been restored to nearly 2 million homes across Texas, but some 325,000 businesses and homes still remain in the dark this morning. The winter weather is being blamed for the deaths of more than 3 dozen people. Utility officials say limited rolling blackouts could still occur as this snow and cold temps will stick around for the weekend. Hospitals around the Lone Star State are relying on generators to keep the lights on. President Joe Biden says the federal government is standing by to help and declared states of emergency in Texas, Oklahoma, and other states being impacted by the winter weather. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says they aren't out of the woods yet and have already begun to make sure this doesn't happen again.
And that starts with reforming the agency in charge of electric reliability in Texas.
The weather also led to a political problem for Senator Ted Cruz, who came back to the U.S. after he was caught on camera leaving for Cancun, Mexico with his family, a trip he now calls a mistake, saying his daughters asked to go on a trip with friends and he went with them because he wanted to be a good dad.
I certainly regret that this has become a distraction at a time when so many Texans are hurting and frustrated.
In addition to the power outages, some 13 million Texans, about half of the state's population, also lack clean water. State authorities ordered 7 million people to boil tap water before drinking it because the record cold weather damaged infrastructure and pipes.
We're running dangerously low on water.
CBN's Operation Blessing is on the ground to meet that need. Crews unloaded cases of supplies in Dallas and Cleveland, Texas, including water, blankets, hand sanitizers, and more. The help is necessary as the problems have been so widespread. As of Thursday afternoon, more than 1,000 Texas public water systems had reported disruptions due to the weather. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Well, people are hurting in Texas, and we want to be there to help them. Operation Blessing is already mobilizing. We have a warehouse facility in Dallas, Texas, and we're providing clean drinking water. We're providing disaster relief supplies. If you'd like to be a part of helping people, give us a call and say, yes, I want to donate to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can call us, 1-800-700-7000, or you can go to cbn.com. There's a place on the giving page where you can designate your gift to disaster relief. Be a part of the solution, be a part of helping people in Texas.
The continuing fallout from that catastrophic winter storm that slammed the central and southern U.S. this week. At least 46 deaths are linked to the storm. Texas is the epicenter of the disaster. Overnight, this hotel north of Austin was engulfed in flames. It was filled to capacity, and most of the guests were people displaced by the storm. Everyone made it out safely. The power is back on for the vast majority of customers throughout the state following 5 days of blackouts and sub-freezing temperatures. But this morning, a new crisis is emerging. The effects of the storm leaving food and safe drinking water in short supply for millions of Texans. Omar Villafranca is in Dallas. Omar, any good news for us?
Not quite yet. So many pipes and water mains burst across the state that about 7 million people, a quarter of the state's population, they don't have access to safe drinking water, and they're under a boil advisory. You can see the Dallas skyline behind me that's starting to turn back on as power gets back on the grid, but now leaders are playing the blame game.
Now, what happened is ERCOT fell short.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott laying the blame on ERCOT, the nonprofit cooperative that manages almost all of Texas's power grid. Abbott calling for state lawmakers to investigate and to winterize power generators to prevent future cold weather outages.
Even if it means the state stepping up, providing funds to ensure that all of the machinery that froze up and was unable to generate the power you need, that may require funding. The state of Texas should step up and provide that funding.
But investigations and upgrades will wait for another day. With safe water in short supply for millions, Texans lined up Friday. 13,000 cases of water were given away at this distribution site in Houston, one of dozens statewide.
I'm under a boil notice too in Fort Worth, but I have no water coming in my home whatsoever. I've got 6 little ones that I need to take care of.
Been up since 5 o'clock, and I've been on the road since 6. And I know it's at 11:30, but I'm gonna sit here until, I have no choice. All the stores in my area are out of water.
With many store shelves bare, food banks are seeing a spike in demand. In the Dallas area this weekend, they're preparing to give out 25,000 meals.
We definitely anticipate there's going to be a surge in the need for emergency food.
All I did was put out the call and say, hey, I need help. They said, we'll be there.
Bob Stevenson is one of nearly a dozen Dallas area restaurant owners cooking and serving hot meals to anyone finding it hard to feed themselves this week.
Packing is in full swing.
And more help came from hundreds of miles away. Charity workers for a Jewish organization in New Jersey drove through the night to deliver traditional Friday night Shabbat meals for a Dallas congregation.
Here we go. Mission Dallas, Texas.
President Biden is expected to sign a major disaster declaration, which will bring more federal aid to the state. And President Biden may also visit, but only if it doesn't disrupt the relief efforts. And Jeff, it's also worth noting that Mother Nature is actually going to cooperate because the high temperatures across the state as we begin cleanup will be in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Finally, some good news. All right, Omar, thank you very much.
This morning, millions still picking up the pieces from a once-in-a-generation winter storm, nearly causing a statewide blackout. While the power is thankfully back up and running for many, more than 8 million are still without safe drinking water.
We don't know when it's going to be fixed, and we don't have any drinking water, any flushing water, any washing water, any water.
There are sprawling lines at food banks and distribution centers that are doing all they can to keep up with the need, stretching statewide.
We're serving just an inordinate amount of food. It's just unbelievable.
Many families now also facing storm-related damage, like burst pipes. That could take weeks or even months to repair.
But I was hoping, no, it's not going to be me. It won't be my house. I opened the door and walked in, and I stepped in the puddles of water.
Their home destroyed, Monica Ware and her husband forced to empty their savings account to pay for a hotel room for their family of 6.
We lost everything.
With some relief on the way from FEMA, state leaders promising to learn from this devastating tragedy.
We're going to do all we can so this never happens again.
But for the family of Christian Pineda, who died from suspected hypothermia after his family's mobile home lost power, changes couldn't come soon enough. Attorney Tony Busby now represents 7 families that lost family members, including the Pinedas, who filed a $100 million lawsuit against ERCOT, the agency managing the Texas power grid.
He saw his first snow, and he died the next day. Something like that should never happen in the United States.
In a statement to NBC News, ERCOT responding, "We haven't yet reviewed the lawsuits in full and will respond accordingly once we do. We are confident that our grid operators made the right choice to avoid a statewide blackout."
Now, one key priority from state lawmakers will be taking on these sky-high energy bills that so many customers are facing across the state. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says it remains a priority. He has not named any specifics, but some are saying to use federal disaster funds to potentially alleviate those bills for the customers.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin tonight with breaking news. Millions of Americans in the South are heading into another night of freezing temperatures without clean water or enough to eat. At food banks and water distribution sites, lines now stretch as long as a mile. Tonight, President Biden says he'll sign a new emergency declaration for the state of Texas, where half of the state is still under a boil water notice. Millions more in Louisiana and Mississippi are facing the same crisis tonight. And things are so bad in San Antonio, Texas, firefighters there struggled to get water from the hydrants to fight off an enormous blaze. Thousands of homes have been destroyed by pipes which have burst, and families are now worried how they're going to pay for the big cleanup. The economic toll from the storms could reach as high as $50 billion. The human toll, well, it's already being felt. At least 44 people have been killed by this week's winter storms. Some of those people froze to death in their own homes when the power went out. And tonight, all that wicked weather has also delayed the shipment of 6 million doses of coronavirus vaccines, forcing appointments to be canceled at thousands of vaccination sites across the country. We've got a lot of new reporting for you on a very busy Friday night. Our team of correspondents is standing by. CBS's Janet Shamlian is going to lead off our coverage from Houston, where temperatures are expected to plummet again tonight. Good evening, Janet.
Nora, there's a critical search across Texas for water tonight. Community groups are collecting it. They're bringing it to centers like this, and then they are shuttling it out to people who need it. How dire is it? Well, the county judge called it a man-made disaster that has cut lives short.
Andrew Rudnick has called at least 100 plumbers to repair his burst pipes. He always hears the same thing.
6 weeks.
The Houston dad and his wife Megan have a 6-month-old daughter, Reese, and they're desperate for help.
What's it like having a 6-month-old and no water in your house for days on end?
It's scary to have to ask a neighbor to use their outdoor hose to fill a pot so that you can boil water for your baby's bottles.
Yeah. They're also worried about mold growing and may have to tear down the walls themselves.
It's definitely overwhelming. We're just talking about where we're going to stay tonight.
The power is back, but half the state's population, more than 14 million, still don't have drinkable water.
This is a drive-through site in Houston for people who don't have water. There are hundreds of cars in line here right now. By the end of the day, they will have given out thousands of cases of water.
Water shortages impacting first responders, too. Firefighters in San Antonio battling low pressure and frozen hydrants.
It's just these hydrants were frozen, and we couldn't get water. We have to go quite a distance to get water.
With many grocery shelves bare, food banks are seeing a spike in demand. In the Dallas area this weekend, they're preparing to give out 25,000 meal kits.
We definitely anticipate there's going to be a surge in the need for emergency food.
Beyond Texas, taps are dry in parts of Louisiana and Mississippi as crews race to thaw frozen water mains. The storm stopped millions in their tracks.
Oh, my God.
Good. But not Jenny Passman's baby. She had to give birth in her living room. No power or running water, but a new baby boy.
6 on the dot. Clyde Passman. You did it.
The best kind of delivery. Here in Houston, as volunteers are working around the clock, officials are saying it could be next week before that boil water order is lifted. Nora, that is a long time to wait.
A long time. Can't imagine delivering a baby in the living room. Janet Shamlian, thank you.
It's the accident turned catastrophe in just seconds. A semi-truck crushing car after car, captured by a driver on the Texas interstate. Only the collisions kept coming. The icy roads creating an early morning nightmare. A pileup of more than 130 vehicles, sending 65 people to the hospital and leaving 6 others dead.
We had multiple vehicles sitting on top of each other. They were in precarious positions.
Fort Worth's fire chief says authorities responding to the scene tried frantically to close the roadways.
The conditions were icy. It was dark. It was cold. They were trying to get the road shut down. They were trying to slow people down, that were unaware of the condition changing ahead.
One of those motorists, Blake Dybel, who was trapped inside his car for hours before somehow walking away unhurt.
Skid for about 100 feet or so, and then hit the wall. And then a few semis came through and just kind of plowed through a lot of people.
Similar conditions in Austin, causing a 26-car pileup there. And it's not just Texas feeling the deep freeze. Across the South, quick-moving ice storms are making for dangerous conditions all over. A pair of teenage brothers in Oklahoma badly injured but recovering after icy road conditions caused their truck to slide right into a moving train.
They knew that it was icy. They said, we did everything we were taught to do, Dad.
In Kentucky, officials urging everyone to stay off the roads.
My driveway, solid ice.
Ice storms turning driveways into skating rinks and knocking out power for tens of thousands of customers as another blast of record cold moves in. And this morning, a large portion of I-35 West remains shut down as they clear that scene and continue to gather evidence to search for that cause.
In the meantime, this area bracing for another bout of extreme weather. Lows over the weekend headed to the single digits. Savannah?
All right, Morgan, thank you. And that brings us to Al's got the latest on severe winter storms, plural.
Yeah, unfortunately, we got a really active storm track. Let's show you what we've got. Literally coast to coast, we've got winter weather advisories and warnings. And in fact, we're watching right now this area of icy conditions coming through the Carolinas and Virginia. Heavier rain down to the south. Here's what we're looking at through Friday, through today. Heavy rain, 1 to 3 inches from Panama City all the way to the outer banks of the Carolinas. Icing today. We're looking at from Danville, Roanoke to Philly, just south of New York, 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of ice. That could cause problems. And light snow through today into the northeast. Now, we've got this ridge of Arctic air, the active storm track. These storms are just piling along this system. This one will come in into the Pacific Northwest, then into the Rockies for tomorrow, bringing feet of snow. Sunday, it plunges way down to the south. But look at this area of snow, and some of it heavy. These folks aren't used to this kind of snow. By Monday, it comes up out of the Gulf, bringing a lot of moisture with it. Snow stretching from Louisiana all the way up into Ohio. And then Tuesday, it moves into the Northeast with a wintry mix from Virginia all the way to Maine. Here's what we're looking at. Look at this swath of snow. Coast to coast, literally 41 out of the contiguous 48 states will see snow. And here's where we're really concerned. From Amarillo, Lubbock, Oklahoma City into Springfield. These folks aren't used to heavy snow. And then we've got another big batch of heavy snow Tuesday on up into the Northeast and New England. It is going to be active. And guess what? There is unfortunately another system behind that as well. So no rest for the weary. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.
Starting this week, Texas lawmakers will start hearings and investigations into power outages and water damage from last week's storm. Those hearings are set to begin on Thursday. Governor Abbott also added 2 emergency items to his legislative agenda to make winterization mandatory and provide funding for power plants to do so. Now this morning, Cleo with us from our newsroom. And Cleo, while local leaders are preparing for the future, you've got a lot of people who are needing help right now. And we understand there is federal help when it comes to cleaning up. So how does it all work?
Right, Kara. Honestly, it's a bit of a mess here. People do need help. This is one of the most clicked on stories on our website right now, asking people, hey, did you have to evacuate your home, leave your home due to the Texas winter storms? People had to leave their home because the power was off for so long. Storm damage, homes were flooded. People need help. So now FEMA is announcing that if you live in one of these 77 counties, you can definitely apply for disaster assistance. I know you can't see everything here on the screen here, but it's an alphabetical order from Angelina down to Wise counties. Of course, Dallas, Tarrant, Collin counties are on this list as well. Now, there's some things to keep in mind here. Go ahead and call your insurance agent first to see what they cover. Register with FEMA online right now if you can, if you haven't already. Go ahead and document damage and repairs. Take as many pictures and videos as you can over the next few days here, and keep all of those receipts if you call the contractor. And once again, those 77 Texas counties are eligible for this. All right, so let's dig into this just a bit more here. FEMA said by law it cannot duplicate benefits for losses covered by insurance, so keep that in mind. Now, if insurance does not cover all of your damage, you may be eligible for federal assistance as well. And the fastest way to apply for that online is at disasterassistance.gov. And the Small Business Administration is offering loans to Texans affected by last week's severe winter weather. It's not just for businesses. We're talking nonprofits, homeowners, and renters can also apply.
Homeowners can borrow up to $200,000 and renters can borrow up to $40,000. There's also assistance out there available for deductibles. So if you have insurance and you're having a hard time meeting your deductible, you're able to apply for these fundings for that purpose.
All right, also keep this in mind here. If you had to book a room and leave your house because of the storm damage, or you just needed to find a place to stay warm, your insurance may cover that stay as well. So please ask them about that. Now, I know there's a lot of things to fill out, and this can be a confusing process for so many people. Well, I'm hoping that many cities do this like Richardson here. You can actually go to their local disaster recovery center at the Richardson Civic Center and the Richardson Public Library. The Civic Center, it starts at 9 o'clock this morning, and people will be there to help you out and fill out all of those forms. Kara, I'll send it back to you.
Hey, that's really good news. I know you don't want to get through the whole process and then screw like one thing up. So anytime you can have that second set of eyes. So we are still coping with the fallout from the power crisis. Like we mentioned earlier, there's going to be hearings in Austin that begin on Thursday to find out what happened. We've heard a lot of different things. One former lawmaker says Texas actually missed an opportunity to start planning and preparing years ago. It's the focus of our newest episode of Politics, which just dropped overnight. If you want to give it a listen, pull up your phone, go ahead and point the camera to the QR code on your screen. The Jasons talked to current Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, who you may know was a state rep back in 2015. Back then, he introduced a bill that would have helped prevent the near failure of the Texas electric grid. That conversation available for you to listen to this morning on your way into work. Mark.
A super timely discussion. Thank you, Kara. The vaccine rollout here in North Texas was put on hold because of last week's storm. 3 federal mega vaccine sites, though, are scheduled to open this week in Dallas, Arlington, and Houston. But there are some delays happening at the sites that have already been open for business. As we get to Chris Sadeghi, who joins us live with more. Chris, we need to get more vaccines up here. It seems as simple as that.
That is always the need, Mark, and one of the many disruptions from this winter storm was, too, that vaccine distribution process. The hub's trying to get back up and running, although for some there was an unexpected and unwelcome surprise in Dallas and Tarrant County. The Fair Park Vaccination Center only was open for about an hour and 1,000 shots on Monday, and they'll be closed today because County Judge Clay Jenkins said there were some shipping delays and they haven't received their next batch of the Moderna vaccines. They hope to get them today and be ready to go on Wednesday. Military personnel from Fort Riley were at Fair Park Monday to train for when the federal mass vaccination site starts to operate. That's scheduled for Wednesday. But the unexpected surprise I mentioned was Jenkins told us Governor Greg Abbott cut supply to Dallas and Tarrant counties by 21,000 shots each and without explanation. He was on ABC's GMA3 yesterday and was upset with the decision.
The governor has moved our vaccine, only North Texas, no other place but North Texas, as he shifted vaccine to other parts of the state. And so we just need that to stop. We've had enough bad news from the governor's office this week, and we don't need any more.
And we tried also ourselves to get an explanation from the governor's office. So far, we have not heard back. That other vaccination site in North Texas will be at AT&T Stadium, the mass vaccination site, the federal-run one. That where they were doing training at the esports stadium yesterday for that vaccination site. Also, they were prioritizing second shot since a lot of people were due for their second shot. Last week it got delayed. They're trying to get those people their second shot first. Also, the Texas Motor Speedway will be open again on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Greg, the last thing we need are any more delays to this process. Is the weather going to cooperate?
Yeah, weather's helping out, and it looks like this morning a little milder out there, as you could tell from Chris. He looks pretty comfortable compared to last week is what we...
The scene we saw today is one really unlike one probably any of us have ever seen, and one we pray to God we never see again.
Right now, a massive and deadly pileup on icy Texas interstates, one of a number of dangerous weather events impacting Americans all across the U.S. tonight. Thank you for joining us on News Nation. I'm Marnie Hughes.
And I'm Rob Nelson. Tonight, more from Capitol Hill as House managers wrap up their case against former President Donald Trump. But first, as Marnie just said, from snow to ice, millions of Americans in the path of wicked weather that is creating treacherous conditions on the roads and leaving thousands of folks right now without power. Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon is tracking weather all across the country.
But first, a pileup that has left several people dead and dozens more injured. Correspondent Marky Martin is live for us in Fort Worth, Texas tonight with the very latest. Marky.
Yeah, Marnie, just an absolutely agonizing situation that unfolded here in Fort Worth early this morning, about 6 a.m. We're still on scene here 12 hours later, and it is still active. And I can tell you what, I've never covered a pileup or a wreck that called for a family reunification center. That's how dire this tragedy was. We're talking about more than 100 cars, 6 deaths, and dozens of people injured. And all of this happened in the blink of an eye.
Oh, he's gonna crash into them. Oh,
Oh!
One after another.
Lee, man.
At the height of morning rush hour.
Oh, slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down.
Cars get crunched along I-35 in Fort Worth. Thursday morning's wintry conditions paving the way for a pileup of massive proportions.
That person's trapped right there.
Traffic coming to a standstill. Those passing in other lanes doing so at a crawl.
That's crazy.
In this video, a firefighter walks across cars as first responders check for those trapped inside, with feels like temperatures in the teens. This sweet pup rescued from the debris as firemen pass him to safety.
I'd like to ask everyone to please keep in your prayers the family members of the loved ones that have lost their life in this tragic accident. I can tell you that so far we have at least 5 fatalities confirmed.
By evening, the updated numbers were 6 deaths, 133 cars, and 65 patients treated at area hospitals.
Boom! Oh my goodness.
By sunrise, the tragedy became more visible from the sky. This aerial footage showing the swath of wreckage left behind. An accident so severe, city officials opened up this community building as a reunification center for families who'd been separated. 13 ambulances, 80 police units on scene, triage centers set up to help the wounded, and warming buses brought in to keep passengers out of the cold.
Yes, hypothermia is something that we worry about. Yes, hypothermia impacts the care and the outcome of patients frequently.
Not in attendance at today's press conference was the Texas Department of Transportation. When asked if the roads had been treated prior to the accident, Fort Worth Police Chief Neil Noakes only saying this.
That is going to be part of the ongoing investigation, but we will definitely be getting more information out about that when we have that information as part of our investigation.
Of course, our thoughts with those families involved today. And I'll tell you this as well, this scene covers half a mile. That doesn't even include the miles of backup of cars. And I also asked city officials this afternoon at that presser, I said, were there any children involved? They said that's the fortunate part about when this happened. About 6 a.m. was a lot of people on their way to work. So there was not one pediatric patient involved. They said they treated a lot of healthcare workers, truckers who don't have the luxury of staying home in inclement weather. And you know, this is only one of several weather incidents happening across the country.
As many Texans brace for yet another day of frigid temperatures and electricity shortages, they also face another challenge, a shortage of water. Millions of people across the state are dealing with disruptions in their water service because of problems at local treatment plants. Here's Omar Villafranca.
We walked in and about 2/3 of the ceiling was collapsed. There was sheetrock all over the floor and water was just gushing in.
Joel Burns didn't have power, but he had flowing water in all the wrong places.
It's disheartening.
This week, Burns says he reached out to 14 different restoration companies for help with repairs, like busted pipes and damaged drywall. All 14 companies declined because they were not available or the job was too big.
Do you think that your insurance company is going to be able to treat you one of probably a million other cases?
I think ultimately, yes, but it's not going to be fast. We're going to be dealing with this for probably over a year.
And insurance will not cover everything.
It'll cost us thousands. I mean, already we've just in the, supplies and stuff to clean this up, we're into many hundreds.
Governor Greg Abbott has asked President Biden to declare a major disaster declaration.
If granted, this will give Texans the ability to apply for individual assistance from FEMA. That individual assistance will assist them with funding to restore damage to their homes.
But repairs aren't the only financial burden Texans are now facing.
Are you worried about what your next electric bill is going to look like?
I'm happy because our rate's locked in, but the nature of deregulation is some people have fluctuating rates and theirs are going to go up.
Most residents enter into one of two types of contracts with energy providers, a higher fixed rate or variable. Variable meaning customers take the chance and can pay low rates when demand is low and higher rates when demand rises. Houston resident Megan O'Neill paid over $2,000 in 2 days. Her February bill is now more than $3,000.
It's like, okay, do I feed my family or do I run the heat? Which one do I do?
Joshua Rhodes, an energy expert at the University of Texas, explains that those with fixed rates could also pay more in the future.
That effect will take later as, utilities and the like assess
how much money that they need to recoup. Eventually, the customer always pays, kind of at the end of this.
So for more on this, I want to bring in Dr. Joshua D. Rhodes, research associate at the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Rhodes, you are Texas is sort of really proud of its ability to be a good energy producer. So this has left a lot of people asking questions. And when I was first hearing about the failure, I was thinking of it as a domino effect, that one thing led to another thing led to another thing. But now, as we're learning more about what went wrong, forgive the pun, it seems like a perfect storm, that all the weaknesses that were already in place basically sort of fell apart simultaneously. How do you see it? What happened to the power grid?
Sure. So, I mean, I think we need to start. So we design systems like the power grid to meet certain demands, to meet certain peaks. And in Texas, we generally design that for hot summer afternoons. I mean, that's when our system shines. That's when most of the excitement in the grid is when everyone wants air conditioning. The difference between then and now is that there's also a lot of demand for other fuels like natural gas. And so homes are wanting natural gas for heating, and power plants are wanting natural gas to make the electricity that homes are also demanding. And both of those grids couldn't come together and deliver all of the energy that, Texans were demanding at the time. But on top of that, we had some supply issues with getting some natural gas from wells to the actual power plants themselves. And this is just more demand than we've seen at one time, across the entire state ever. I mean, I've never seen all 254 counties of Texas under a winter storm warning at the exact same time.
So Texas has its own power grid, which I think all of America sort of learned, with the exception of Texas, learned this week. I'm wondering, though, whether or not you think deregulation was a factor here. Texas went through something similar several years ago where there was a major winter storm, maybe not this bad. The suggestion was that, some of the infrastructure be winterized. And from what I have learned, it just never happened. Do you think that deregulation and kind of like what happened was sort of increased competition, which is a good thing? It's good for consumers because they pay less for energy, but it also did not encourage these utility operators to invest the way that they should. If you get the question that I'm asking you?
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. So I don't know that the deregulation itself has been really the cause of this, because when we do calculations, when the grid operator's done calculations based on how much power plants do we need to weather through our summer events, but also weather through our winter events, no pun intended. But all of the scenarios that they ran, kind of the average scenario, the worst case scenario, they all showed us being able to meet those peaks and be fine. Now, obviously, those scenarios and those forecasts were wrong. But I don't know that if we had been a regulated entity, if we had been a top-down entity, one company owns all of the power plants, the transmission lines, and they're the ones you pay your bill to, I don't know that they would have done planning any better. I mean, it's because we don't plan for fail-safes really in any of our infrastructure, because it would just be too expensive to do that type of thing. So there's some level of risk we accept, but maybe Texas needs to have a conversation about, should we be planning for more, since we've actually seen it now.
Yeah, I actually think that's a conversation that might have to happen across the country when it comes to utilities and being prepared for these major weather events. Because, I mean, we say it every year, this was going to be the storm of the century, but actually this is the third storm like this that we've seen. Like, we're seeing more intense weather. And so I guess my next question for you is, what happens moving forward for the state of Texas? How do you prevent this from happening? Is it just a matter of looking at your worst case scenario and thinking even worse than that and then preparing for it?
Yeah, so I mean, we have to make a decision based on, how much do we want to plan for? Because obviously the worst case scenario that we plan for is going to cost more money. And so, I mean, I think there are certain things that we could have learned from our 2011 event, like we can weatherize our power plants better, we can weatherize our natural gas infrastructure better. After those events, those best practices were made voluntary. You know, perhaps they should be compulsory now, as the governor was talking about.
Electricity retailer Gritty is asking Texas customers to leave now before you get a big bill. Why are some power utilities telling customers to flee or cut back when the state is freezing?
I know that. I mean, that tells you something's kind of wrong in a market when people are asking you to leave and go to their competitors. So the way that the wholesale electricity market works is you've got power plants on one side and you have these retail electric providers on the other side. And in Texas, these retail electric providers, those are the ones you're actually buying electricity from. And if, retail electric providers might be selling electricity to consumers for, say, something like 10 cents. But the past few days, they've had to buy that electricity in the wholesale energy market for something around $9 a kilowatt hour. And so the difference between those two is massive. And so some of these, companies are having trouble or, keeping, their books straight. But what Gritty does is they pass that cost directly onto the customer. And so some customers will be feeling these high prices. Now, those customers didn't have to opt into those plans. They weren't forced to. It was an option to. For most of the time, they've been having really low cost power because ERCOT typically has very low cost power. But the past few days, yes, they've been high. In some cases, you may go from spending $1 a day on electricity to hundreds of dollars a day.
Hey, I should ask you before I let you go, how are you doing? You look warm and dry, so I presume things are okay for you right now.
They were. We lost power for a couple days, and it got, close to almost into the 40s inside the house, which is pretty rough. But we're making it through, trying to keep things as cool as we can to try to share the energy and get the most people connected back to the grid as we can.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin with breaking news tonight on the severe weather disaster that is hammering more than 100 million Americans right now from Massachusetts to the Mexican border. As we come on the air, the crisis is expanding. In parts of hard-hit Texas, snow is still falling. And while the power has been restored to millions of people there, about half of Texans now don't have access to clean running water. One city even warning residents only use the water they have to sustain life. In Houston, America's fourth largest city, there are long lines for food, for gas, and even for plumbing supplies. Things are also bad in Oklahoma, where President Biden declared a state of emergency after the longest stretch of sub-zero temperatures there on record. And in Louisiana, 1 million more people also lack clean water tonight. Up and down the East Coast, snow and ice are causing serious car crashes and pulling down power lines, plunging tens of thousands into the dark. This winter storm is also creating a political one, too, with Texas Senator Ted Cruz now under fire after he was spotted on a flight to Cancun while his constituents were suffering in the cold. In a state where the motto is "Don't mess with Texas," tonight pretty much everything there is. CBS's Lonnie Quinn is standing by with the latest forecast, and our team has a lot of new reporting for you tonight. CBS's Janet Shamlian is going to lead us off tonight from Houston. Good evening, Janet.
Nora, good evening. We are inside one of the thousands of homes across Texas that has been ravaged by this storm. Take a look at what a Houston mom and her daughter came home to. The ceiling is gone. Walls throughout this house are buckling. Everything they own is soaked. There will be no easy recovery.
This is where the desk was.
This is what the storm left behind for Sean Theory. When the pipes burst, her world exploded. The house is now unlivable.
I mean, this is a nightmare. This is everyone's nightmare. Your home is, your abode is where you go to find your peace and work, and now I'm uprooted.
The Texas state representative and her 8-year-old daughter are in a hotel. They won't be able to live here for months.
I'm living through Hurricane Harvey all over again.
Theory is among millions in a new phase of misery. With the lights coming back on, the horrors of the storm revealed.
All the business cards were floating. So water was in the drawers. Water is now behind this wall.
Water everywhere or nowhere. The line to get into a plumbing supply store running for blocks. More than 13 million, almost half the state's population, have water issues. In many homes, the tap is dry.
It's been a little crazy.
I mean, we've got a ton of dirty dishes piled up. It's been really hard with flushing toilets, obviously.
Finding bottled water nearly impossible. Some using snow.
So here I've added some more ice.
Houston opening 11 sites today, giving away water.
You have water?
No. But food is hard to come by. Long lines, often bare shelves.
This is Walmart, guys.
Tonight, frustration boiling over.
I feel like we shouldn't be going through this. It's been like 3 days.
Cases of carbon monoxide poison are surging as people struggle to stay warm. And tonight, this video of Texas Senator Ted Cruz arriving back in Houston under police escort, less than 24 hours after he was spotted on a flight to Cancun, escaping the outages.
We had spent 2 days without power, and my girls wanted to take a trip with their friends and frankly get somewhere. It was warmer, and Heidi and I agreed. We took them. I flew them down last night, and then I just flew back today.
There was outrage after these photos became public. CBS News has learned Cruz was originally scheduled to return Saturday, not today. Janet Shamlian, CBS News, Houston.
Some of the worst winter weather on record is disrupting much of the nation's life again tonight. Extreme conditions have claimed at least 15 lives, stemming from a variety of causes, including a tornado. Stephanie Sy has our report.
In southeastern North Carolina today, down power lines and homes ripped off their foundations.
This is going to be take a lot of hard work, effort between cleanup, rebuilding.
Officials say at least 3 people were killed and 10 others injured by a tornado that ripped through Brunswick County just after midnight. It struck with little warning near Ocean Ridge Plantation, a coastal community some 45 miles south of Wilmington.
We have a lot of hard work to do as a community to get it back to normal, to make the community safe for the residents to go back in to the areas that were unaffected. But it's definitely a very hazardous situation with debris, homes damaged, stuff all over the place.
Elsewhere, more chaos from an unrelenting weather pattern that's gripped much of the country. Winter storm advisories by the National Weather Service again today stretched from coast to coast. Bitter cold in Gulf cities across New England and the eastern Great Lakes. Chicago woke up to more than a foot of snow, with more falling by the hour and dangerous wind chills.
You really have to hold your ground. I mean, seriously, you have to be very, got to stand sturdy.
In the southern plains, record cold temperatures extended to another day. The surge in demand for energy has prompted more utilities across central and western states linked to the same power grid to initiate rolling blackouts. Today in Oklahoma, more than 130,000 homes and businesses were without power. In Texas, largely on its own electric grid, 4 million were in the dark.
It's cold. Kids around, trying to stay warm, fireplace, there's no firewood anywhere, no stores open.
Many rush to hotels to keep warm.
The temperature being so low, it gets so cold in my house so fast.
While others turn to shelters. But in Houston, Mayor Sylvester Turner said space is running out.
Because of COVID and the healthcare protocols, we simply can't take any more. We've gone significantly over and above what we had scheduled, what we had planned.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott deployed the National Guard to conduct welfare checks until power is restored. The weather brought COVID vaccine distribution to a halt in some places amid icy road conditions and widespread airport shutdowns. And it closed the Houston Ship Channel and Gulf Coast refineries, spiking the price of oil.
Just to underscore the scale of this deep freeze, the National Weather Service put out a list of 20 cities from the Gulf Coast up through the Great Plains that are seeing record low temperatures today. The demand is taxing the capacities of energy grids, most significantly in Texas. To help us understand what's happening, I'm joined by Michael Wara, Director of the Climate and Energy Policy Program at the Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment. Michael, thank you for joining us. Texas is the largest energy producer in the entire United States. How is it that residents there are in a situation of multiple days of power outages?
Well, it's a combination of 2 factors. One is really unprecedented demand for electricity during the wintertime. The demand for power has exceeded the grid planners' worst case scenarios by a significant degree. Also, power plants are not performing as expected, especially natural gas-fired power plants in Texas right now.
You know, it's interesting because some have actually used the energy crisis in the last couple of days in Texas to point out that Texas's turn toward renewable energy, namely wind power, is more the issue. Why do you say natural gas is the problem?
Well, I think, let me just say, it's a complex set of factors, but what we know right now is that the wind power plants are mostly meeting their expected performance levels. But what is not happening in Texas is that many of the thermal power plants, the plants that boil water to make electricity, like natural gas-fired power plants, coal-fired power plants, and at least one nuclear unit, are not producing energy. They're suffering outages, and that dwarfs the amount of wind resource that's not performing right now. So it really is a traditional power plant problem, not a clean energy problem.
Okay, but this is Texas, and they're not used to, in February, having peak demand for heating, for electricity. Could this have been anticipated in any way? And what does this say about the need to perhaps update infrastructure?
Well, I think this raises really important questions about how grid planners think about extreme events in the context of climate change. We saw in California this summer unprecedented heat waves that led to outages, and now in Texas in the winter, we're seeing an unprecedented cold snap. And this kind of extreme weather is what scientists believe is most likely to occur during climate change. And so it suggests to me that planners need to be updating their forecasts to take account of the extremes that are likely to come our way.
And what can be done in the near term that's realistic to update the nation's power grids to deal with extreme weather events, which you point out climate change is expected to bring more of, not just in Texas, but in California, on the East Coast as well?
Stephanie, I think you used exactly the right word there when you said what can be done about the power grids. The most important step that the United States could take would be to invest in building a truly national transmission system. That's something that President Biden has suggested might be a good idea as a stimulus program. There's no question that having a national architecture for our power system would help us to avoid circumstances like what is happening in Texas and in the Midwest as well right now. If we had wires stretching from coast to coast, the places that had problems could lean on the places where there isn't bad weather, like where you and I are today.
And are you confident that renewable energy sources like solar, like wind, that the technology exists to store those energies the same way that natural gas would be, so that those transmission lines could actually reliably and flexibly carry that energy to customers?
Well, there's no question that long-term storage, particularly in the winter, is a really difficult technological challenge that we really don't have all the answers for yet. But we could certainly produce a lot more of our electric power from clean resources than we do today, and do it reliably and safely if we had a more robust transmission system. I think in the long run, we're going to have to solve some difficult technological problems, but that's in the long run. Today, we could put much more wind and solar on the grid and serve everyone's needs, but we are going to need to build a more robust mechanism for getting that power to where it's needed.
Well, there are a lot of people in freezing cold temperatures right now in Texas and elsewhere in the country that are hoping for some solutions. Michael Wara with the Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The lights are back on in much of Texas tonight, but for millions, the water isn't working. It is the latest crisis in a grinding week of winter storms that have now claimed at least 70 lives. We turn again to Stephanie Sy to begin our coverage.
After long days in the dark, the power has largely been restored in communities across Texas that endured bitter cold.
I don't know when it's going to go off again. If it'll go off, I don't know, so Immediately when the lights came on, I hurry up and made a pot of shrimp gumbo and warmed up.
State grid operators said today their system is finally back to normal operations, nearly a week after some 4 million customers lost power. That number had fallen more than 90% by this evening. But there was no end in sight for a debilitating water crisis. Pipes that burst in the frigid temperatures have led to a shortage. 14 million people have been affected, many of whom are now having to boil their water before they consume it.
The temperature in the house was 33 degrees, and now the power's back on, so it's warm, but we don't have any water. So I'm here to get water. I've been to several different stores, and no one has water.
Houston's Del Mar Stadium hosted a bottled water drive-through distribution today.
I'm going to sit here until, I have no choice. All the stores in my area are out of water.
24-year-old Trent Helt echoed that experience, speaking to us from Arlington outside Dallas. A main pipe burst has cut off water to his residence since Monday.
It's been interesting to say the least. We haven't been able to shower or bathe yet. We've had to buy multiple packs of water to either wash dishes or to bathe with. To flush the toilets, we were scooping the snow up and we were boiling it to melt it down. And that's how we would flush the toilets at our house.
You're probably
Yes, ma'am.
really tired of the sponge baths.
Most definitely. I cannot wait to take an actual shower.
Meanwhile, President Biden promised a major disaster declaration for Texas to expedite much-needed resources, and he plans to visit the storm-ravaged state soon.
If, in fact, it's concluded that I can do it without creating a burden for the folks on the ground while they're dealing with this crisis, I plan on going. But we'll know that. We'll make that decision probably the beginning of next week.
As calls for accountability grow louder, Bill Magnus, the president of ERCOT, which manages the state's power grid, said today his agency is open to new ideas.
We're subject to policymakers and leaders and how they want us to operate. And if they're seeing that there's something that's really got to change from looking at the totality of what we did, we'll certainly try to change it or take any other action we're told to do to manage the issues that they're seeing.
Hey, ho, ho! Ted Cruz, that's got to go!
Texas Senator Ted Cruz also faced calls for accountability. Protesters gathered outside his Houston home after it was revealed he'd flown to Cancun as the state was reeling from the storm. He flew back Thursday.
It was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it. I was trying to be a dad.
Elsewhere across the South, water issues are also plaguing other states that were hit by wintry weather. In Mississippi, nearly all of the 161,000 people in the city of Jackson were without water today. And in Tennessee, the Memphis International Airport was forced to cancel all of its flights because of low water pressure.
We head back to Texas now, where the water outages are severely impacting operations at hospitals already stressed by the pandemic. Joining me now is Dr. Esmael Porsa, President and CEO of Harris Health System in the Houston area. Many of its patients are uninsured and underserved. Dr. Porsa, thank you for joining us on the News Hour. So I understand that one of your hospitals this week was so desperate for water, the fire department had to be called, where they then distributed water directly from a hydrant. What happened and how are things now?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And I want to start, as always, by thanking all the healthcare providers and nurses and everybody else who's taking care of our patients in our hospitals. You're correct. A couple of nights ago, around 1 o'clock in the morning, I was notified that the water pressure inside of our water towers that supplies water to the hospital, in addition to our HVAC system that controls the humidity and the temperature of our hospital, was rapidly running out of water. It was a desperate situation. I was told that within a few hours, if we could not replenish the water to our water tower, that we would have to actually evacuate the patients out of the hospital. So I was able to call the city. The city was great in responding very quickly. They sent a fire truck to the hospital. They were able to, as you mentioned, able to connect the fire hydrant using a hose to a water tower and slowly bring the water up The water hydrant, unfortunately, was facing the same issue as the rest of the systems here in Houston, Texas. The water pressure was extremely low, but it was enough to buy us time so that during the day we were able to actually purchase several thousands of gallons of water that was delivered to us through trucks to maintain our operations. And as the temperatures rose and as the water pressures improved, we were able to actually maintain. We are holding steady right now. The issue is no longer the water. The issue is the people coming to our emergency rooms, ours, in addition to other hospitals in this area, because urgent care clinics are shut down. The main issue right now is our dialysis patients. We having historic number of dialysis patients coming to our emergency room seeking treatment because private dialysis centers have been closed for the entire week.
So even before this week, hospitals were already dealing with a surge of COVID patients in many cases. Are you at capacity at this point? Are you having to turn away any of these dialysis patients coming in or anyone else?
Well, we are at capacity. We have been at capacity. As you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we are the safety net hospital for Harris County, the largest county, the most populous county in Texas. So we have been at capacity almost from the beginning of the pandemic. We've continued to be at capacity. The situation has not gotten any better. What has happened actually since the start of last week or this week is that the patients who are ready to be discharged can be discharged home because they also lack power and water. So we have our inpatient units getting backed up even more than what they have been. They have been more than 100% capacity for a few days now. But to your question about turning people away, we do not turn anybody away. We have not had to turn anybody away. We have more than 20 or 30 now patients waiting for dialysis treatment in our emergency rooms. Unfortunately, we are only able to provide so many services. As you may know, dialysis is not a quick thing. It takes at least 4 hours for each treatment. And we only have so many machines. And to make the matter even more dire is the staffing. Our staff are not immune to everything else going on in the community. So they have the same issue with loss of water, loss of electricity, busted pipes, damaged ceilings. So it's all adding up to become the perfect storm in an already really bad situation.
Well, Dr. Porsa, we certainly are glad that you have at least the water you need for right now and that the temperatures are warming up. We wish you the best, to you and your staff. Dr. Esmail Porsa, President and CEO of the Harris Health System, joining us from near Houston. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. We begin this hour in Texas, where power has been restored to millions of residents, but a new crisis is underway. Sub-freezing temperatures have frozen water pipes, causing them to burst and flood homes across the state. This week's rolling blackouts have also shut down several water treatment plants. Nearly 1/4 of the population is under a boil water advisory as the state struggles to supply clean drinking water. In addition to the growing water crisis, there are growing concerns over a lack of fuel and food across the state. Many residents have been forced to wait on long lines at grocery stores only to find bare shelves inside. President Biden says he has spoken with Texas Governor Greg Abbott about addressing the state's growing need for additional aid.
I talked with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, the administrator, this afternoon. I'm going to ask him to accelerate our response to the request for, quote, it's a different declaration, a major disaster declaration, so that we can get everything done that we need, that's possible to get done with federal government help.
President Biden says FEMA has already sent dozens of generators and supplies to aid in the recovery. The president says he could travel to Texas as soon as next week, as long as his presence does not hamper the disaster response. Joining me now for more on Texas's recovery efforts is American Red Cross spokesperson Dan Halliburton. And Dan joins us from Dallas, Texas. Dan, welcome. Thank you for being with us. So, as you know, millions spent most of the week without power, and now millions more are without water. Tell us a little bit about what the Red Cross is doing on the ground there to help provide aid during this crisis.
Well, the Red Cross throughout the state of Texas has been setting up a number of shelters and warming stations. It's been so critical because homes were just not habitable. It's just too cold. Matter of fact, last night here in North Texas, it was 19 degrees. And with no power, that makes a home really just miserable.
How did people get through the night? I mean, we hear stories of people cutting up furniture to make fires. You know, some of the stories are so harrowing. I believe, you know, people perished overnight due to hypothermia. Are we at least not in those dire straits at this moment? Have we at least moved a little bit forward from that?
There is a little improvement today. The sun is shining, and that has started to melt the snow. You're starting to see more traffic on the roads, and people are starting to get out. And so we want to take care of them with our Red Cross shelters right now, but we're going to have a new challenge coming up. And that's going to be as temperatures warm and houses thaw out and broken pipes thaw out, we're going to have major cleanup and major repair in a lot of homes that may continue to keep people out of their homes for some time to come.
So what would you say is the greatest need on the ground at the moment there?
Well, the greatest need is to help people make a plan on how they'll move forward. You know, the communities are, you know, very much coming to grips with all that. The power is coming back on. That makes life a whole lot better for a lot of people. So now we need to really help people make a plan. A lot of folks are staying in hotels. They're staying with friends. And what they need to do, if you need help, call 211 in your community. Go to redcross.org. The Red Cross is here to help. We're continuing to respond to home fires. Our home fires in North Texas have more than doubled in just a handful of days. So we want people to be safe at home, and we want to help them in any way we can. Redcross.org is the way to get that done.
And of course, the Red Cross is also providing shelter to the many residents displaced by this deadly winter storm. About how many people, roughly, would you say are staying in your shelters across the state?
We've had almost 3,000 shelter stays at our shelters to date. One of our other challenges, too, is our blood supply. You know, the Red Cross collects blood all across the United States. And here in Texas and other states, those drives have been canceled. RedCrossBlood.org is a way that you can actually go out and help by donating blood. So that would really be helpful.
And tell us about how the ongoing coronavirus pandemic is impacting your organization's efforts to aid in the recovery. What protocols are put in forth to ensure people staying in the shelters remain safe? And you know, is there any attempt to help with the vaccine distribution, or is that completely on pause as other things are attended to?
Well, the vaccine portion of that is being handled, of course, by the county health departments and their agency partners. So the Red Cross is not as involved in that. But we're certainly following all our COVID protocols. The only reason I don't have a mask on right now is I'm standing out in a field with nobody around me at all. So it's a little easier to talk to you today. But one of our big challenges is the COVID-19 virus. So we're wearing masks, we're social distancing, we've got all kinds of protocols in our shelters and among our staffs. When we do our home fire work, we try to do that virtually if possible. So we've been very creative with dealing with the virus. We'll continue to make sure that we're watching out for everybody's safety, both the people we work with and our own workers.
What has surprised you the most about this weather disaster? Is it the fact that, you know, in our country, a weather storm causes so much despair? Was it the fact that the, you know, energy infrastructure couldn't hold? What was the most surprising to you? You who've seen a lot of disasters.
And I usually travel to the disaster. This time the disaster came to me, unfortunately. It's a slow rolling mess of misery. And it reminds me of what kind of happens after a hurricane, where so much of the infrastructure is devastated and so much is offline. But when you bring cold weather into that and people can't live in a home, it just adds a level of misery that's just unprecedented for anything I've ever participated in. At one point, the state of Texas, 265 counties, we had a winter storm warning for every county in the entire state of Texas. It's just mind-boggling.
Oh, my goodness.
It's getting a little better. It's getting a little better, but we still got a ways to go.
Well, Dan Halliburton, we thank you so much for all that you're doing for the people of Texas there, and we wish you the best of luck, and all the people there. We wish them safe drinking water, warm homes, all of those things that we take for granted. We hope it returns to them quickly. Dan, thanks again.
Oh my God.
This morning, misery in Texas.
It's really freezing. It's horrible.
Millions statewide spending another night in the dark without electricity, heat, and for a growing number, running water. Flooding homes, only adding to the nightmare. State officials offering little guidance on when any of it will be over.
Every source of power that the state of Texas has been compromised.
Lavelle Traylor and her father Lewis have spent the past 4 days inside a cold, dark home using a single gas stove to stay warm.
I know God is here, but who else? We're supposed to take care of our people.
To the south in Houston and Galveston, millions being told to boil their water after outages impacted treatment plants.
Going to be in this for a couple of more days.
Emergency officials now fielding hundreds of calls related to carbon monoxide poisoning as people resort to desperate measures to stay warm.
Do not use grills indoors and do not run your car inside your garage.
And with limited water, even fire departments are struggling to battle blazes.
They're running from one call to the next, trying to do the best that they can.
The Lone Star State is alone in having its own power grid, allowing it to bypass federal regulations that would require safeguards for this exact type of cold weather. ERCOT, the nonprofit that operates the grid, admitting they are not able to compete with Mother Nature.
ERCOT saw the storm coming. The storm blew in. It also did damage to the supply side, and that knocked us enough out of balance that we had to take on these outages, as difficult and damaging as they have been.
The dangerous storms roaring across the country, leaving snow and bitter cold from Arkansas to Illinois. The Northeast now bracing for impact as folks in Texas do their best to survive.
It's really terrifying to think about people dying from these freezing conditions, and we don't want to be one of those statistics.
And this morning, the White House has pledged generators and diesel to Texas hospitals and other critical facilities to hopefully keep them open throughout this weather crisis. And Governor Greg Abbott banning the sale of natural gas across state lines to make sure those in-state have ample supply. Hoda?
All right, Morgan, for a second, let's go back to those viral photos. They just showed just how freezing it is there in Texas inside the homes. We saw the freezing ceiling fans. We saw the water that couldn't come out of the sink. So does this underscore how the area isn't built for those kinds of conditions?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't stress enough how unprecedented this is in its sheer scope across the entire state. I want to show you this picture of a cactus encased in ice out towards the western part of Texas. That's nearly unheard of. And then look at this. Down in Houston, where it's typically balmy this type of year or close to it, you have a playground looking more like an icicle collection. And then, unfortunately, all too many of these photos have been popping up. People forced to literally camp inside their own homes in a desperate effort to stay warm. I've had friends try to do that exact thing, parked right in front of the fireplace, doing whatever they can until that power can come back on.
Yeah, you hear about people burning their own furniture so they can have more firewood. I mean, they're going to desperate measures. All right, Morgan, thank you so much.
And there have been a lot of emergency calls about carbon monoxide poisonings, people going in their garages to warm up any way they can. So the situation is very dire there, Dylan.
It certainly is, and it's not going to really warm up to like 40s, 50s until we get into the weekend. So it is going to stay brutally cold. We are now watching the storm make its way into the mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast. It is snowing pretty good in Philadelphia, starting to coat the grounds there, and we are going to see that continue for the next several hours. But to add insult to injury, temperatures right now are below freezing across most of Texas, and we have just a little disturbance producing more snow and more ice. But the big event we're tracking for today is bringing that snow through New Jersey, through Maryland, through Delaware. We're seeing that icing, though, in areas like Virginia, where we already have about a half an inch up to 3/4 of an inch of ice coating the ground. A treacherous, dangerous situation there that will likely lead to some power outages as well. As we go later into this afternoon, the snow and the ice kind of fizzle out for a bit, but then it regenerates overnight into Friday morning. So we'll see a secondary round of snow and ice across the mid-Atlantic as we go through Friday morning. So we're looking for mostly ice through Virginia. That's the dangerous stuff. We also have more snow and ice likely down across southwestern Texas, of all places, and additional snowfall through the Northeast. We're looking for about 4 to 6 inches, I'd say, of widespread snow, but it's really the icing that coats the trees, the power lines, and the roadways that will be the biggest concern. But I'd say a widespread 4 to 6 inches, lesser amounts, I'd say, as you go farther south where you see that changeover. And here is the ice we're talking about in Virginia, in Maryland. I mean, a half an inch up to 3/4 to an inch of ice is just very, very dangerous.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.
A massive winter storm is threatening more than 150 million Americans in 25 states. Winter weather alerts stretch for more than 2,000 miles from the Mexico border to Maine. Record snowfall in parts of Texas has knocked out power for millions and threatened to destroy thousands of doses of coronavirus vaccines. The storm has also shut down vaccination sites in the southern plains states. Omar Villafranca is in Dallas with the latest.
Tonight, a record cold snap has turned Texas into a tundra. Flurries fell in southeast Texas, blanketing Galveston's sandy beaches in white. The city manager there warning infrastructure damage caused by the extreme temperatures could rival the cost of a hurricane.
Slow down, slow down, slow down.
Frozen roads sent an 18-wheeler careening out of control near Austin, and a man nearly lost his life jumping just seconds before a car lost control and crashed into a police cruiser. The extreme low temperatures spun up this so-called snow-nado in East Texas.
The ultra-low temperatures will last for several days, meaning that what becomes frozen will remain frozen for a long period of time.
The historic storm caused problems across the country. Firefighters in Vermont rescued this young man from frigid waters after he fell through the ice. Tennessee roads turned into ice rinks after frozen precipitation fell. In Little Rock, Arkansas, cars were brought to a standstill on a slippery highway, trapping nurses who just got off their shift.
Stay home or stay where you are. Stay home.
The temperatures in parts of Oklahoma dipped below 20 degrees for 5 days straight for the third time ever. And with another storm looming, crews worked to clear snow as fast as they could. Nearly 4 million people across the South have lost power. In Louisiana, the cold caused a transformer to blow, ripping a fireball through power lines. The agency overseeing Texas's power grid has declared its highest emergency level in over a decade. Texans sitting in the dark tonight after rolling blackouts were issued due to high power demand. The power outage also complicating the fight against the pandemic after a facility storing vaccines in Houston lost power. Medical officials scrambled to use them before they spoiled, and students at nearby Rice University lined up for a surprise dose.
Power providers from Kansas to Texas are urging their customers to conserve energy, but that is going to be hard to do because new winter storm warnings were issued from Dallas all the way south to San Antonio, and that could affect 15 million people. Elaine?
Omar Villafranca, thank you. For more, I want to bring in CBS News meteorologist and climate specialist Jeff Berdelli. Hi there, Jeff. So where is this storm headed to next?
All right, so the storm's moving through the Ohio Valley and the Northeast as we speak. It's going to deliver ice, snow, and rain. Rain along the coast in places like New York City and Boston, but west of that it is snow and heavy snow in the Ohio Valley. So anywhere from St. Louis over to Chicago, and especially Indianapolis, Columbus, Cleveland, and Buffalo. That's where the heaviest snow is going to be, but you can see also we have some ice as well. So here's the hour-by-hour forecast as we head through the nighttime hours. Watch out. Detroit, Pittsburgh, you're kind of on the line. Buffalo, it's snow. Burlington, it's mainly snow, but notice it's mainly rain for the big cities of the Northeast. It's going to be quite a bit of ice right here, West Virginia, southeastern corner of Ohio, straight through Pennsylvania and upstate New York. So it's a lot of warm air getting in all the way almost to Burlington, Vermont, as you can see. And there's the heavy snow across the Great Lakes, Cleveland, Buffalo. Likely there's going to be about 6 to 12 plus inches of snowfall there as this system begins to move out. It should mainly be done by the mid-morning hours tomorrow.
Well, the polar vortex is still sitting over much of the U.S. How long can we expect it to last?
Well, it's not going to go away immediately. It's going to gradually kind of moderate over the next few days. The worst of it is right now through tomorrow morning. So let me show you these feels-like temperatures as we head through the evening hours into Tuesday morning. Watch these wind chills. It'll feel like 5 below on Tuesday morning in Dallas, 10 below in Tulsa, 36 below will be the feels-like temperature in Fargo. At this point, Fargo's kind of used to it because it's been like that for about a week or so. These temperatures are a solid 40 to 50 degrees below normal for this time of year. Just to give you an idea, today 55 is the normal temperature in Oklahoma City. Instead, it was about 5 degrees. And by morning, it's way below zero, and Oklahoma City is 48 degrees below their normal temperature. So this is unprecedented cold, kind of once in a generation cold, especially as you head far south into Texas.
Just brutal. And I understand, Jeff, you're tracking another big impact storm. Where and when will this hit?
So it's almost the same place, and it's going to happen Wednesday and Thursday. So we get a one-day break, and then another storm kind of rolls in. So let's show you that storm. Here we are Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Look where it's snowing. Oklahoma City. Look where there's ice and snow. Dallas. This time, the ice doesn't get down to Houston, but it's still pretty far south, and that heavy snow and heavy ice is going to track through some of the same areas, into Tennessee, into the Ohio Valley. But the difference this time is it's going to be snow and ice in New York City and snow and ice in Boston before it eventually changes to rain towards the end of the event. But there could be some significant accumulation here in the big cities of New York and Boston, to the contrary of what's happening right now, which is this one's going to be mainly a rain event. So it's going to be a busy few days, and that cold air and those power outages, you know, those power outages could last, Elaine, for quite a while, and because of that, people will be without power and temperatures will be in the teens, 20s, in some cases even near zero or below zero. So this is kind of a very dangerous few days ahead in the U.S., especially the South.
Yeah, it's something that people really need to keep in mind here when we talk about that, because those power outages, you're right, having covered the aftermath of some of them, really can leave people in such dire straits. Jeff Berdelli, keeping track of it all for us. Jeff, thank you.
You're welcome.
Overnight, a deadly tornado ripping through the North Carolina coastline.
Unfortunately, we had 10 injuries that we could report this time, and we had 3 confirmed fatalities.
The powerful cyclone tearing down homes into piles of debris, ripping trees from the root and slamming them into nearby structures and vehicles.
Multiple houses gone, nothing but foundations. I need help.
Knocked out power lines lay along the wreckage as widespread outages roll through the entire region. All this while first responders look ahead to hours-long search and rescue efforts.
I expect to go into the afternoon tomorrow. Hopefully, as we get through this, we'll recover and we'll support the community and get back.
This as a brutal cold snap wreaks havoc nationwide. The Arctic blast tearing its way south for Morgan, where a Safeway roof collapsed under piles of snow. To Texas, where millions are stuck without power, facing record lows. Rolling blackouts issued to save the state's power grid from crashing.
There's a huge demand, a very limited supply. It is a system-wide failure across the state. These are power outages at a huge, unprecedented scale.
Impossible driving conditions causing hundreds of accidents. The governor deploying the National Guard and more than 3,000 state troopers.
Flights grounded in Dallas and Austin. Crews rushing to remove snow and ice.
We're just not prepared for it. The city's not set up for this kind of weather. It's not typical here.
Officials in Kentucky urging drivers to stay home.
We did not make it through almost a year of a pandemic to lose people to a snow or an ice storm.
The winter blast turning deadly in Louisiana after a 50-year-old man slipped on ice. And thundersnow caused this scene after blowing a transformer. In Georgia, new video shows the aftermath from a rare February tornado, now tied to this massive system.
This is incredible!
But the cold snap's not a negative for everyone. Some folks are still out and about, trying to make the most of this wintry weather.
Never get to experience this. I mean, I've never seen this much snow in my lifetime, so I want to try to soak it up as much as I can.
And this morning in Dallas, we are sitting at a single 1 degree. It could get even colder before the sun comes up, and this weather system is not over just yet. More snow is anticipated tonight, with millions of people crossing their fingers and hoping that power comes back on.
Yeah,
back to you.
Morgan, thank you so much. I mean, you can't imagine people in their homes right now without power, freezing temperatures outside.
Yeah, and then some of them told boil water, but you can't.
Yeah, right.
So it's really a dark times, literally, for our folks down south. Mr. Roker's working from home. He's got his eye on everything, though. What do you got, Al?
Yeah, in fact, guys, just 15 minutes ago, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, -1. That ties with the third coldest temperature ever for that area, for Dallas. Right now, winter weather alerts for 34 states, literally coast to coast. We're talking 95 million people impacted. This one system is now making its way off the coast with a mix of freezing rain, snow up into northern New England. Here's our second system, and this is going to be another big problem. Wednesday, the low will develop in the western Gulf, a morning mix of snow, sleet, and rain for Texas and Oklahoma, where they do not need it. And then as we move through Wednesday night into Thursday morning, that all starts to mix into the northeast and mid-Atlantic as a second low develops along the coast. And then as we move into Friday, that storm system pulls off. Snow and ice continues into the northeast. We are looking through Wednesday for another 2 to 5 inches of snow for Dallas. They do not need that, obviously. 3 to 6 inches in Oklahoma City, up to 9 inches in Little Rock, 5 inches in Memphis. And as we make our way Wednesday into Friday into the northeast, we're looking at generally moderate snow from the Appalachians into the northeast and parts of New England, and ice, dangerous ice conditions through Thursday from eastern Texas into Tennessee, and also the Appalachians into the mid-Atlantic and parts of the northeast as well, guys. And of course, there's this brutally cold air. We're going to take a look at that coming up. But those temperatures are going to be hanging around for at least the next 5 to 6 days. So winter is not releasing its grip anytime soon. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity interviews, uplifting stories, shop our favorite deals, and so much more with the Today app. Download it now.
Arctic temperatures and rolling blackouts hammering Texas as the country sees record lows throughout the South and Plains states. More than 3 million homes and businesses without power and heat, including more than 1 million residents in the Houston area. City officials slamming the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, the private company that runs about 90% of Texas's electric grid.
We've been hit hard by nature this week, but we can't deny that some of this is a man-made disaster as well. And the 5 million residents of this county and really this region and this state will deserve answers from ERCOT and the state once this is over.
ERCOT CEO saying the company is dealing with more outages because of frozen wind turbines and limited natural gas supplies.
I think what has happened here is a response that kept the grid from collapsing, that kept us from going into a blackout condition. And certainly we need to look at what has happened here once we get everybody back online, which is the #1 priority.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott placing the blame squarely on ERCOT and has called for a review of the electricity system in the state.
The power generators froze up in their equipment was incapable of generating power. And then on top of that, the natural gas that flows into those power generators, that is frozen up also. What ERCOT should have been able to do is to have backup systems in place. They have provided zero explanation why they do not have backup systems in place.
The state's water supply is now in jeopardy. In Galveston, Texas, the water supply is critically low. And in Houston, the mayor warning its residents to conserve water.
I'm Camila Bernal, CNN correspondent right now in Dallas, Texas. And this is the situation in Texas. It is so rare, so abnormal to see Texas covered in snow. And at first, it was exciting for a lot of Texans. This is something that had not happened in years. Like doing this, picking up some of the snow was not possible in many years here in Texas. It's a lot of snow. It is cold. It's been really cold over the last couple of days. But the problem was that it was not just fun and games. It was fun in the beginning, but once it becomes 1 day, then 2 days, then 3 days without any power, without any water for some, without any heat, that's when things got really complicated. And that's when Texans started to get upset, started to ask questions. Why in the world was Texas not ready for these temperatures, for this cold? And so what happened was that there was a lot of finger pointing as to why this is happening. And so the governor, Greg Abbott, specifically went online and went and talked to a lot of reporters here in Texas and started blaming ERCOT. So ERCOT is the company. It's a private company that manages the electrical grid here in Texas. And so what they said is that they're basically trying to do everything that they can to get the power back, but they have not been able to do so. And so there's been that political finger pointing sort of back and forth with all of this, and residents are pissed off. They're just saying, look, we don't care about the back and forth. We care about getting our power back. And at the moment, they just don't have answers. It is, let me give you the time. It is 9:20 a.m. here in Texas. And the problem is that they're still not being told when exactly they're going to be able to get this power back. There's no promises. And I do want to answer some of your questions about what the situation is here in Texas. Tara specifically was asking, when will we get the power back? I have a toddler and a teenager, and we lost power in the middle of the night on Monday. And so that's the problem. The storm came in Sunday night into Monday, and still people like Tara are without power. And ERCOT is not giving them any answers, according to the governor and the local officials. So there's really no answer to this, unfortunately, Tara. Some people did get their power back overnight, and we're being told that it was because the low usage overnight, that sort of freed the system a bit. And so yesterday we were talking about 4 million customers without power. Today we're now talking about 2.5 in the state of Texas. But the problem for people like Tara is that they're not getting an exact answer as to when it's going to happen. Now, Jason asked, with the electricity out, what does that mean for the COVID-19 vaccines in the state, and how will this impact their rollout? So there are many delays as to the COVID-19 vaccine. And what is happening is that they're not wanting people to be out in the street. They're not wanting people to be getting the shots at the moment. And I have seen local officials speaking about this, and they say they will get the shots. People will be able to do this. They just may be delayed. So people who had these appointments for this week, that's probably going to be rescheduled for many people here in Texas. And so even though it is going to be delayed and maybe a bit complicated, there are some local officials that are promising that they will get those shots into the arms of the people that were promised. Of course, it is still too soon to tell exactly what is going to happen with the shots and with the vaccines, especially because there is this long pause. There are no deliveries at the moment. People are not out on the roads. And so we'll have to wait and see what exactly happens as to the COVID-19 vaccines. And every city is doing it differently. Places or the counties are all doing it differently. So we'll have to wait and see and get specific instructions or directions from the counties and the cities who are administering these vaccines. Now, Anna is asking, is the deadly winter storm related to climate change? The weather is getting crazy everywhere. And so I do want to clarify that I am not a scientist, but I do know that this is not something that normally happens here in Texas. We're having record-breaking temperatures. I think it was Tuesday or Monday in the beginning of this storm. The temperature was something that we had not seen in about 70 years here in Texas. And so you are seeing things in a different way here, things that were not normal and that of course are weather related. So it is likely that this is all linked to climate change, and we're likely going to see scientists look into this and study this and specifically tell us what this is all about moving forward. But it is important to point out that this is not normal in the state of Texas, and we'll have to wait and see if it becomes something normal in the winters here. Now, Justin is asking, will increased costs to restore power be passed on to customers in Texas? That is a great question, because people, of course, do not want to be paying any more money for this, but they do want this to be resolved. And so Governor Greg Abbott says that he wants an investigation into how this is being handled. And so I think this is a question for the Texas legislature and what they will do about this. Will they invest more money into trying to get this all figured out in the future? I'm not sure at this point, but because so many people are suffering, this is getting people to act. So you're seeing lawmakers all over the state promising an investigation, promising to look into this, and promising to act. And so I think it is up to Texans to demand from their local leaders whether or not this is something that is going to be passed on, whether the bill for all of this is going to be passed on to the taxpayers. Now, there's a question from Peter who says, who is ultimately to blame for all of these outages? If you ask the local leaders, if you ask Governor Greg Abbott, at the moment, they seem to be pointing those fingers at ERCOT. That is that private company that runs about 90% of the electrical grid here in Texas. At the moment, it seems like both Republicans and Democrats are pointing the finger at this company. Of course, if there is an investigation, we will have answers as to what happened and if they are to blame. But at the moment, you're seeing local officials, including the governor, blaming this company at the moment. And then there is another question from Amy that says, why is this winter storm in particular so dangerous? It's becoming so dangerous because people are literally freezing inside of their homes. So we're talking temperatures of 20, 30 degrees inside of a home. People have no way or no methods as to how they will get warm, and that becomes extremely dangerous inside, outside of the home. On top of that, you have people who are not used to this snow. So for many people, it could be common sense and it could be something that they know and are used to, but for people here in Texas, they have to be told not to bring any grills, any outdoor, essentially anything that can cause that carbon monoxide poisoning. People are trying to warm up inside of the cars, inside of the garage. There's dozens of people who've been taken to the hospital, including children, because they've been poisoned from this carbon monoxide. And so even though for some people this is normal and they know not to do this, in Texas they don't. And so that's why it becomes so deadly. At least 4 people have already died from the poisoning. And so as we continue these days without any water, without any heat, without any electricity for many here in Texas, that's where it becomes dangerous. And that's where local authorities are continuing to tell people to just be very careful and very patient. But it's definitely not easy for a lot of Texans here at the moment. And then there's a question from Martin who says, how could Texas have avoided this situation? That is the million-dollar question. How could Texas have been prepared for this? I think the answer to that is yet to be seen, because they still don't know how this happened, why it happened, and when it's going to get fixed. So could they have avoided this situation? It's yet to be seen, and I think that if there is an investigation into ERCOT and how all of that is will play out, will give us an answer as to whether Texas could have been prepared for this or not. At the moment, many will say that Texas was not prepared for this, that they maybe could have avoided it. But the reality is that they may not want to invest the money at the moment to prepare for something that doesn't repeat or doesn't normally happen here in Texas. Will that change? We'll have to wait and see. There's still a lot of questions to be answered, and that's sort of the frustration from so many Texans at the moment. Whether they're having to deal with no power, or even if they do have power, they still want to know why this happened and when this is going to end, because the reality is that there's not a lot of food on the shelves at the moment, and people are starting to get frustrated with the state, and they want answers. They want to know when this is all going to be over.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott is asking President Biden to declare a major disaster declaration after massive winter storms brought devastation to his state's power grid. Officials with ERCOT admit they were just moments away from the entire collapse of the energy grid, which could have potentially left millions of people in the dark for months. They say the only reason they avoided that was because of the rolling blackouts they implemented. But the problems keep piling up for many Texans. Along with the outages, freezing temperatures have caused water pipes to burst, leading to flooding. Even fires are an issue. Some crews report they've been unable to aggressively battle flames due to low water pressure. This all comes as a recent piece in the Texas Tribune, which has been doing tremendous reporting on what's happening in the state. In a new piece in the Texas Tribune, it claims state leaders knew winter storms could leave the electric grid vulnerable, but that they left the choice to prepare up to the power companies. Erin Douglas is in Louisville, Kentucky. She's an environmental reporter for the Texas Tribune and one of the authors of that article. Again, Erin, I'm so grateful for the reporting that your paper has been doing throughout this crisis, because it really has been valuable to people all across the country who are trying to understand what's going on in Texas. So let's start with why Texas has its own power grid. I think many of us who don't live in Texas, we're not aware of that. So explain how the state was able to gain independence from the rest of the nation and avoid federal regulation. And I hope it's not as simple as, don't mess with Texas, like we do our own thing.
Right. Well, this goes back several decades, and so it's historically been pretty isolated. And the reason is because by not crossing state lines, Texas utilities avoided being subject to certain federal rules. That has come under some criticism during this crisis, because while Texas's grid does have some connectivity to Mexico and to the eastern U.S. grid, those ties are pretty small, they're pretty limited on what they can transmit. And so that became a problem during this crisis, experts told me, because other grids couldn't really help us out that much when we were really needing additional supplies of energy to our grid. So that is potentially something that experts say policymakers might look at.
And as I sort of understand it, when you talk about how Texas became independent in this way, is they also were in a very unique situation where they were able to create a large amount of energy, and they also had consumers to purchase a large amount of energy. So there wasn't a need to buy energy from elsewhere or have excess energy that you could then sell. It was this perfect little sort of self-contained business. But now what we're hearing from many officials, at least very early on, particularly Governor Abbott, is pointing the finger at some of these green alternatives. But there's been a lot of debate about just how we know that, there's certainly some of the infrastructure froze. But when we're looking at windmills and solar, just how much blame should they be taking for this?
Right, that's become a huge source of debate. And it's really important to understand that every source of energy in Texas struggled in the storm earlier this week. Many of the plants are not set up to withstand this sort of extreme cold that Texas endured. And Texas is an energy state. We produce the most amount of natural gas in the U.S. We produce the most amount of wind power. And natural gas in particular struggled during this crisis. They had severe problems because production of natural gas went way down when wells froze and we weren't able to get natural gas out of the ground. We couldn't get it transported to the natural gas-fired power plants that produce the energy. And even those plants had problems with lines freezing, components freezing, and they weren't able to operate. And so we even had a nuclear plant go offline for a time during this crisis. And so it's really important to understand, windmills, yes, wind turbines, yes, they were freezing. But many other sources of energy also really struggle during this storm, and natural gas is a huge component of that because Texas relies so heavily in the winter on natural gas.
You know, Aaron, former U.S. Energy Secretary and Texas Governor Rick Perry says Texans would rather go without electricity than give the federal government more power over the state. The Washington Post had a heartbreaking story about an 11-year-old boy, Christian Pavone, who went to bed. He was 11 years old. He went to bed in an unheated Texas home, and he died. And the authorities suspect it was hypothermia. Didn't complain. He, like most children, never do, especially when they're cold. You never really hear kids complain. He went to bed just like he did every night, and he didn't wake up. His parents tried to wake him up, and he didn't wake up. And I just cried reading this story because this is the United States of America, and to have a child of that age die of hypothermia in his own home, and then to hear Rick Perry say, yeah, Texans would rather go without electricity than give the federal government power over their state. I don't know about this is not a political discussion. It's more of a question about the mentality of how people think about power, electricity in the state of Texas.
Right. I mean, Texas is a energy state, and I think that Texans want reliability of the grid. I mean, every Texan who went through this crisis this week wants reliability of the grid. These are heartbreaking stories. These are stories that, should never happen again. And I think that ultimately, we're having some of our state leadership call for review. Governor Abbott just recently called for some winterizing of the grid, which would potentially prepare some of these power plants from such extreme weather. And so I don't think that Texans, are willing to sacrifice having power and heat or anything like that in order to avoid regulation. I think that there's going to be some hard looks at ERCOT and the state's framework for regulating to make sure that this never happens again in Texas.
So throughout the week, we've brought up the 2011 storm in Texas, similar but not the same. There were a list of recommendations that included winterizing some of this infrastructure. It never really happened. Some of these companies are not going to invest in this sort of thing, which I guess they're hoping it will be a once in a blue moon storm happening more often, but they're not going to invest in it unless they're compelled to. You mentioned that the governor is making that suggestion as well, but is there any conversation about putting a little more teeth into this sort of stuff, really putting pressure on these companies to prepare for the worst case scenario?
Yeah, so Governor Abbott, his comments yesterday, he's calling for the winterization in the grid, and he seemed to suggest that the state legislature should provide some funding for that, or at least help try to fund that. The other thing to note here is that the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which does have some authority to regulate from a federal level, is currently developing standards for winterizing plants. And so that could also be definitely a factor here in making sure that Texas is prepared to withstand future storms like this.
Let's talk about climate change, which is creating new challenges for infrastructures across the country. Texas is obviously seemingly unprepared for this new reality. The question is, how can the state better prepare for future crises? But also, what needs to go into? Is it a question of education? Is it a question of politics when it comes to climate change? I have a very close friend of mine in Texas. He doesn't believe in climate change. And the effects of it are evident as we see them time and time again, not just in the United States, but all around the world. So given that most Texans are skeptical, given most of their elected leaders are skeptical, what needs to be done to prepare the state for future crises?
Right. Well, I spoke with climate scientists earlier this week, and, previous indicators are becoming less useful as we see more intense weather. And even if there is uncertainty around the connections between climate change and cold air outbreaks from the Arctic, climate scientists agree we should really be treating infrastructure design, such as the power grid, with a larger spectrum of possibilities, rather than just thinking that this storm is a rarity, maybe only happens once in 100 years. I think Texans would agree that even if this is the 100th year, we want to make sure that this never happens again. So I think that, as far as climate change goes, this will become a topic of conversation in the Texas legislature. And maybe you don't even need to talk about climate change and have the debate as to whether or not it's man-made or real or any of that. You know, the science is clear that humans are influencing climate change. And so maybe the conversation is just, let's make sure that Texans never experience this sort of disaster again.
Right? At the end of the day, does it really matter what you believe about why this storm has occurred? It's here. That is a fact, and you have to deal with it. And we're seeing this sort of stuff happening over and over again. Listen, before we let you go, I should just get a sense of, you know, what it is like there in terms of the power. I know many people have already gotten their power back. The temperatures are expected to dip into the teens overnight. Are we talking about, you know, full power? Are we still looking at brownouts? Because I'm sure the same level of demand that was there before that caused the brownouts, it's going to be there again, you know, when everything gets back and running. So what's the current status in the state?
Right. So as of yesterday, less than 2% of the Houston area was without power, which is great. That's a significant improvement from earlier this week when, you know, almost the whole region was out. And Austin Energy reported Thursday morning that 13% of its energy customers were without power. Again, that's a better improvement than we saw earlier this week. And so power is being restored to people. And I think that these plants are, you know, slowly coming back online. The trick with the electricity grid is that it constantly has to be balanced. So as you bring more supply back online, you can bring more customers back online, but it's a delicate process. You need to kind of ramp that up. And so that's what we're seeing this week. There are also some outstanding local impacts. So if there was any sort of infrastructure that was damaged during the storm, stuff like that, then we have to get crews out there, make sure that those are fixed so that we can restore the power to people. So there may be some local impacts where people don't have power quite yet.
Erin Douglas, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
One last freeze tonight before this winter blast moves out.
There are so many of you still in need, where you can find water, food, and plumbers.
The state's plan to fix the power problems and your water at home, including shipping more groceries into Houston and getting refineries back online.
Many crops lost across Texas due to the freeze, the impact that will have at the grocery store.
Thousands of new COVID vaccines coming to Houston next week.
And serving up a hot dish of gratitude for many working long hours this week. KHOU 11 News at 10 starts right now.
We only have one more night of sub-freezing temperatures before we can finally kick this winter storm to the curb and enjoy a warm-up this weekend.
Yeah, get it out of here. But first, David, Paul, are we talking about another hard freeze that could lead to more busted pipes overnight?
Northwest counties will be in the mid to low 20s. That's a hard freeze warning for Columbus to Brenham, Industry to Waller, Conroe to Huntsville, Bryan over to Livingston. These are the areas that will be hardest hit tonight by the cold temperatures. And here's the forecast going into 6:30 Saturday morning. Brenham 24, College Station 24, Tomball 26, Hobby 31, Bush 28. So cold, but this is not considered a hard freeze here in the Harris County area. You've got to get right to the coast. Galveston to be above freezing. Angleton's at below freezing at 30. Even Mont Belvieu drops down to 30. So everybody one more freeze. Then we rebound into the mid to upper 50s. I think some neighborhoods are going to hit 60 with sunshine tomorrow afternoon. The warm up continues. I'll show you for how long coming up in just a few minutes.
Can't wait to hear more. See you soon, Dave. Houston's Office of Emergency Management has been flooded with calls for help to their 311 line.
And the city says the Public Works Department has gotten nearly 5,000 calls just for busted pipes. So from pipes to food and the search for clean water, Janelle Bluta is looking at all the resources available to you.
Well, the power may be on, but many of us are still having to boil our water and search for food, which is why we want to make sure you have everything you need to get your life back to normal. In the search for food, many restaurants around town are starting to come back to life and grocery stores are stocking up.
We have 1,500 trucks on the road today, almost 200 in the Houston region alone. That is akin to what we do Thanksgiving week.
H-E-B says if you go to their stores, they will have food.
H-E-B has food. We are not without. We just might not have everything on your list, on your grocery list.
In addition, the food bank will be giving out food in Stafford tomorrow from 9 to noon, and HISD will hand out food at Barnett Stadium from 2 to 5. And when it comes to water, citywide distributions are happening on a daily basis. Tomorrow you can find bottled water at the Astros Youth Academy starting at 9 a.m. and on Sunday at 2 p.m. at Butler Stadium. Lastly, those busted pipes. For that, you'll need a plumber. ReadyHarris.org has resources where you can report your damage, and there's a link to the Texas State Board of Plumbing Examiners, where you can search for your plumber to make sure they are licensed. If you have insurance, reach out to them immediately and start documenting everything with photos and videos. If you don't, still document, but Governor Abbott says they're working with FEMA to get you help. He also says plumbers will be coming from out of state to help with demand. And the mayor has announced he's creating a relief fund for seniors and those without the means to pay to repair damage to their homes. With the city's 311 line being so busy, they say you can also submit service requests online or also here on their app. Guys?
Very helpful information, Janelle. Thank you. We know it'll come in handy as everyone continues to work to recover. We have all that information on our website, khou.com, including details on those water distribution events and a list of water districts still under boil water advisories tonight.
Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo says people deserve answers and accountability, especially after this winter storm killed people. She tweeted earlier today that this was a, quote, man-made disaster that has cut lives short. She says there were at least 10 hypothermia deaths in Harris County, along with more than 600 carbon monoxide cases and counting. And Galveston County's district attorney is opening a criminal investigation into the agencies responsible for power outages on the island after at least 3 people died after losing power.
President Joe Biden says he'll sign a major disaster declaration for Texas to free up federal and state money. He'll also plan to visit as soon as he's able.
Working like the devil to take care of their folks. If in fact it's concluded that I can do it without creating a burden for the folks on the ground while they're dealing with this crisis, I plan on going.
So you heard him mention he doesn't want to be a distraction with his visit because of relief efforts, so he'll make a decision early next week on when to come. And Governor Abbott laid out his plan to help Texans recover today. Our Grace White explains what help is coming and the challenges that remain ahead.
We're working around the clock, and we will continue to work around the clock to address and to meet your needs and challenges.
As people across the state are coming up for air after being crippled by the cold, from Austin, Governor Greg Abbott laid out a 4-part plan to help Texans recover. It includes restoring power, restoring water, speeding up food and water supply, and getting refineries damaged back online to support fuel. The state already delivering water on C-17s to areas like Galveston. Of the 7,000 local public water systems in the state, 1,000 have been impacted, affecting 14 million Texans.
I have ordered the state legislature to investigate exactly why ERCOT fell short here and to make sure this never happens again.
Are you surprised that it got this bad?
No, I'm not.
Ed Hers is a University of Houston Energy Fellow. He says after the Texas grid failed in a cold snap 10 years ago, there were calls to fix it. But the reason it didn't happen, money.
And it's going to come out of either the taxpayer's wallet or the consumer's wallet. By the way, that's the same wallet.
Texas lawmakers already have a tough session ahead, a budget deficit, economic loss from the pandemic, and now keeping the lights on the mind of every Texan.
Our prices are going to be a lot higher than our neighboring states for a while we catch up and build the infrastructure.
Next week in Austin, there's a hearing on all of this, and late tonight, another water delivery is expected for Houston on one of those C-17s. Lynn and Mia.
Dwight, thank you. Tomorrow, the Houston Health Department will resume giving out COVID-19 vaccines. The city is contacting people who are due for their second dose. It was easy for some of us to forget during the winter storm that we're still dealing with a pandemic. And there's a chance we could see a spike in COVID cases. With so many people staying with friends and family to keep warm, COVID safety precautions were likely put on the back burner.
It's entirely possible we will see a I hate to say surge, it may not be that bad, but an increase in cases over the next couple of weeks.
But there is hope on the horizon. The mega vaccine site at NRG is set to open on Tuesday and will be able to administer 42,000 shots a week for the next 3 weeks. You can register to be added to the wait list at readyharris.org.
Some schools will remain closed next Monday and Tuesday. That includes Houston ISD, Aldine, and Spring ISD, to name a few. Others are planning to reopen campuses on Monday. That's including Humble and Huffman. It does vary by district. So here's what you should do. Text the word school to that number, 713-526-1111. We'll text you back with the most updated list of closures and reopening plans. Again, just text the word school to get an automatic response.
Good evening. I'm Ron Trevino. Food and safe drinking water are the biggest concerns tonight after that winter storm. But area leaders, businesses, nonprofits, and celebrities are stepping up to help. David Gonzalez live with the latest now. David.
Hey, Ron, yeah, get this. Yesterday, the city distributed more than 1 million units of water, and today, hundreds more lined up for their chance at getting some of that precious water. But the city says the good news is that the city's water system is back to normal. There's no denying the need for water in the city of Houston. While water has been restored in people's homes, the city remains under a boil notice.
Until we come out of it, there's going to be a tremendous need to provide people with drinking water.
Water distribution sites like this one continue to draw thousands. Mayor Sylvester Turner says the city's water system is back up and running.
So you should be seeing a noticeable improvement in your water pressure.
But he's asking residents to do their part to conserve. He wants people to hold off on non-essential water use, like getting their cars washed.
And I'm going to ask even car washing companies, businesses, if they will hold for this weekend. Let us get past this crisis, this challenge, and then you can proceed.
Houston Public Works has sent water samples to TCEQ to get tested.
When we get those results back tomorrow, we'll be able to determine whether or not we have any bacteria growth in the system, and we'll be able to lift that boil water notice as soon as we get the all clear.
The city hopes that will happen by Monday. For now, residents will have to depend on distribution events like this one for water. And the city does plan to establish a relief fund, and they say that they'll be releasing the details to that fund on Monday. Ron, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, David Gonzalez. We've been getting a lot of love from the Big Apple this week. New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was at the food bank this morning with Texas Representatives Sylvia Garcia and Sheila Jackson Lee. AOC, as she's called, has also been helping to raise money for relief teams that are giving food, water, and shelter to Texans in need. As of last night, they raised $3.2 million. The New York representative says they're looking to help anyone who needs it, no matter what.
Are documented, undocumented, no matter what your income, no matter your housing status, you can get help here, which is one of the reasons why we are so proud to support the Houston Food Bank, because we want to help everybody. You need it, we'll be there. That's the New York spirit, that's the Texan spirit, that's the American spirit.
The money is going to up to 12 different groups giving on-the-ground relief to Texans in need. That includes food banks, shelters for the homeless, family, elder care, and Corazon Ministries. Houston's own Trey the Truth and Beyonce are teaming up to give back. The Relief Gang and the Be Good Foundation had a drive-through distribution on Main Street today. They gave out cases of water and 1,000 hot meals to at least 8,000 Houstonians. The Relief Gang also went to James Harden's 13 restaurant to give out even more food and water. Trey says this is just two of the many ways he's been giving back since his own power went out.
It always hits me in the heart, man. That's one thing they know about me. That's what I do have, is a heart for my people. So every situation, every disaster, any problems we go through, if I'm able, I'm always going to be on the front line, and that's what we're doing right now.
The Relief Gang's also getting plumbers together to help repair pipes around town. Now, if you want to get involved, their contact information's on your screen. You can email reliefgang@gmail.com or call their hotline at 346-857-9617. Anheuser-Busch is teaming up with the Red Cross to make sure Houstonians have access to fresh water. Our cameras were there as the beer company delivered more than 35,000 cans of water to New Light Church this morning. That water will be distributed among warming centers throughout the Houston area. On Houston's south side, people saddle up to raise money and supplies for those impacted by the winter storm. The Turkey Leg Hut teamed up with hip-hop producer Jazz Prince for a trail ride. Prince says it's all about promoting togetherness during this time of great need.
Trail ride is a family thing, man. We all come together and we all ride out for a good purpose and, try to, get the unity back together.
If you'd like to donate money or supplies, hit up Jazz Prince or Turkey Leg Hut on Instagram. Anheuser-Busch is teaming up with the Red Cross to make... elsewhere in the news now. President Biden today signed the major disaster declaration for Texas, meaning you can now apply for FEMA money to help with damages. You have 2 ways to apply, over the phone or online. Melissa Correa walks us through the process.
If you want to apply for help through FEMA, call 1-800-621-3362 or visit disasterassistance.gov. The entire state of Texas qualifies for federal aid, with counties in the pink, like those across the Houston area, also qualifying for personal relief. In order to apply, at least one member of the household must be a U.S. citizen. If you have insurance, you must file with your insurance company first. Anything not covered by insurance could qualify for FEMA help. In the case of this winter storm, FEMA is helping with rental assistance, temporary housing and home repairs, low-cost loans to cover uninsured property losses, and other programs to help families and businesses recover from the disaster. Another option is 211. The helpline is matching Texans with resources, from paying rent and utility bills to finding food and water.
It's been a real challenge, particularly for families who are working really hard, having a hard time making ends meet from month to month. And with this, what you now have is a disaster within a disaster.
The helpline is available 24/7, and its resource database is basically updated in real time. Melissa Correa, KHOU 11 News.
It's been a sunny and cool day as southeast Texas continues to thaw out. There's a live look over the Galleria area. Blake, we're done with the freezing weather, I hope, right? For
yes,
a while.
We certainly are for a while, it looks like. So that's the good news in our headlines tonight. No freezes anywhere across southeast Texas. You are good to go, it looks like. Now, you may still need a light jacket or a sweater as you head out the door because it's still going to be on the chilly side, but even 40s right around this point still feels more like July than it does February, especially considering what we've been through. So temperatures will be near normal over the next 7 days and just a few slight rain chances in the forecast as we head into the extended. So I really don't see any big hiccups in our forecast as we head into the weekend, the rest of the weekend, and into early next week. Temperatures right now cooling on down, 52 degrees at Bush Airport. We still have 58 in Huntsville, 57 in Katy, 57 also in Sugar Land, and 52 degrees there on Galveston Island. Now, let's take a look at the forecast over the next couple of hours here. You can see generally clear skies all the way through 11 o'clock. Those temperatures cooling on down into the 40s, but only those mid 40s. It looks like we're going to bottom out right around 45 or 46 degrees, and temperatures continue that slow climb all the way up to 70 as we head into next week. We've got that full forecast coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Blake. A Conroe family whose young son died during the winter storm has enlisted the help of high-profile attorney Tony Busby in their lawsuit against ERCOT and Entergy. The lawsuit alleges gross negligence by the power grid operator and the electricity provider, saying it led to the death of 11-year-old Christian Pendenda. The boy passed away Tuesday after spending the night in his frigid mobile home that lost power. The lawsuit says the Christian died of hypothermia, and the family is asking for more than $100 million in damages. Medical examiners have not yet released the cause of death. We reached out to ERCOT and Entergy about the story. Entergy said, "We are deeply saddened by the loss of life in our community. We are unable to comment due to pending litigation." And ERCOT also issued a statement saying, quote, "We haven't yet reviewed the lawsuits and will respond accordingly once we do. Our thoughts are with all Texans who have and are suffering due to this past week. However, because approximately 46% of privately owned generation tripped offline this past Monday morning, we are confident that our grid operators made the right choice to avoid a statewide blackout." Thousands of more Texans are warming up this noon hour. Hello, everybody. I'm Ron Trevino. Major progress in bringing more power to more people after days of sitting in the cold. We know it's been hard and frustrating. A look at CenterPoint's outage map this afternoon. Fewer than 40,000 customers are without power, a huge difference from yesterday. when it was still hovering over 1 million. CenterPoint is hoping to have power restored by the weekend and says they're putting out all the energy and gas they get from ERCOT. But we know many of you still need help. Mayor Sylvester Turner tweeting this morning the city of Houston is bringing on a number of generators to increase water pressure and that the city will be giving out water to those in need now. It's really a double hit, water, power, and we're still talking about more freezing temperatures on the way. A hard freeze. Let's bring in Blake Matthews. Hey, Blake.
Hey, good evening, Ron. Yes, we have another hard freeze. We're looking at temperatures getting down to the teens and lower 20s overnight tonight. So those without power will certainly be another dangerous night of very low temperatures here across southeast Texas. To add to the mix here, we're talking about snow falling now. We're getting lots of reports from snow from Cypress out towards Tomball, getting up into Montgomery County as well. Lots of snow falling from Huntsville to Bryan and out towards Austin and San Antonio. Now, we will keep that chance of snow in the forecast for the early afternoon. In fact, zooming on in, you can see once you get up towards Conroe and out towards Pinehurst and Hempstead, that's where we're seeing that transition over to that wintry weather and some heavy snow this afternoon falling there in San Antonio. We have a winter weather advisory in effect for the northern half of southeast Texas and a winter storm warning out there towards San Antonio. Now, Metro Houston is not included in this winter weather advisory, so if you do see any snowflakes falling here in the city of Houston, they are not anticipated to stick to the roadways. However, what you're looking at here is that hard freeze warning in effect for nearly every single area with the exception of those areas right around Galveston Bay. So those of you in Galveston County, Southeast Harris County, Southern Liberty County, and all of Chambers County, you guys are not included in this hard freeze warning, but everybody else is. And we're talking about temperatures of 24 degrees or less as we head into the overnight hours tonight. It's currently 35 degrees at Bush Airport, 33 Conroe, 29 up there in Huntsville, 30 degrees out there in Brenham. That is where it is snowing. So if you are headed out 290 or headed up I-45 and you start getting into those areas that are below freezing, that is where we could see more issues on the roadways as that snow and sleet continues to come down this afternoon. As we head into the 4 o'clock hour, everybody remaining in those mid to upper 30s, it looks like. But it's when we head into the overnight hours into 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, the model painting 24 degrees here in the city of Houston, 20 in Conroe, 16 up there in Huntsville, 14 in College Station, 17 in Brenham, and even near freezing all the way down to the beaches. So another very cold night, but I think once we get through tonight, that is when we begin that very slow process of warming up into the 70s by the end of next week, and we've got that full forecast coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Blake. Stay up to date with the very latest. Get the KHOU mobile app. It's free to download in the App Store. People are desperate for water. We saw a line at Hayden Park in Spring Branch, people ready to get water from a spigot that had water pressure. Some good news for Houston. The city is opening water distribution sites now. Michelle Choi, live at a loading site. Michelle, what can you tell us?
Well, Ron, watching those long lines of people waiting for water is just heartbreaking. Over the last few days, Houstonians have had to endure a lot, and some are still facing hardship. Well, guys, good news, help is on the way. Just moments ago, you guys heard Mayor Turner announcing that the city will be starting a fund to help homeowners whose homes have been damaged in this winter storm. But they're starting by helping our most vulnerable, our senior citizens and people with disabilities. Now, right now, I'm at a Houston Public Works warehouse. I can't tell you exactly where this site is because they don't want people showing up here. However, take a look at some video I got earlier, guys. We saw city trucks loading up pallets of bottled water. We're told from this site in total 10 plus trucks will deliver drinking water to senior citizen facilities throughout Houston today. This is a citywide effort that comes after boil water notices were issued across the Houston area yesterday. That boil water order now extended to at least Sunday or Monday, but Mayor Turner says things are improving. As you might imagine, water shortages have caused major issues across the city, impacting everything from our hospitals to delaying response time for our first responders. Now back out here live, guys. Again, the water being distributed from this location I'm at is going to be taken to certain senior citizen facilities. But Mayor Turner says the city is working with district council members to establish more sites that will be available to everyone, as soon as we know that list of those water distribution sites, we'll of course update you guys and post that. By the way, if you are disabled and need water, the city says there is a website that you can go to sign up and have that water delivered. That website is on your screen right now if you take a look. It is crowdsourcerescue.org. Ron, back to you.
Michelle Choi, bottled water in high demand. Thank you so much. We have a system set up where you can text keywords to 713-526-1111 and get information right to your phone. They're on your screen right now. Text school, power, or water for more information on those subjects. Remember to text one word at a time. Many of you are upset with this one. We've seen pictures circulating online showing Senator Ted Cruz taking off for a trip to Cancun while the state deals with power outages, water shortages, and freezing temperatures. The Associated Press reports he's headed for a family vacation but is expected to return immediately. That was from a source with direct knowledge of the situation that spoke with anonymity. We'll let you know when we learn more information about that. Now, if your pipes froze in your home, you may be dealing with something like this. Pipes that burst leave a terrible mess, a problem many of you are facing, and that mess has a rush on plumbing supplies right now. We saw a packed house in Montgomery County at a Home Depot. Anna Yeli Ruiz is live in Southeast Houston. Anna Yeli.
Hey, Ron. Well, the same story here. I'm on the 45 South and the Beltway at the Home Depot here, and you can see right behind me, this parking lot is pretty full because lots of people are looking to start those repairs for their home. People here telling us they're mostly looking for materials to fix those busted pipes. The manager says they've also been busy with people looking for materials to fix their walls and lights that might also have been damaged by the water. But the most popular section here is definitely the plumbing area. Contractors and plumbers are just getting what they need to make those repairs.
Yeah, so there's a big line at the plumbing section, and everyone's looking for just plumbing parts, PVC, CPVC, copper.
I just got a call. I do plumbing work, and someone called me. They got a busted line, so I'm headed over there right now to fix it for them.
So how busy have you been?
This is my 5th call tonight.
And you heard him, he's been working nonstop to repair plumbing issues for people here in the area who unfortunately are having problems due to those extreme temperatures. Now, he said he was on his way to help repair a plumbing issue for a 72-year-old man who had a busted pipe in his attic and couldn't get to it. Ron, we'll send it
Great
back
to be helping out other Houstonians. Thank you so much, Annie.
Good morning, and thank you so much for waking up with us. I'm Kara Sewell. Marcus took working from home this morning, and we are following breaking news. Hundreds of thousands of people in Texas are without power right now as the state implements rolling outages to relieve stress on the power grid. So we have team coverage for you on this breaking story this morning. I know I experienced at least one, and Greg, my husband, told me about the second one. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute. So this is all happening because of the dangerously low temperatures. That's difficult for someone. Your power's been out for a couple hours.
Yeah, the power with those temperatures in the single digits, well below zero with the wind chills, and the travel conditions are still going to be hazardous out there for you this morning. So here's what you can expect. Snow is ending. We'll show you radar here coming up in just a little bit. It has been heavy off to the east. It's moving now. So those road conditions, snow covered with the blowing and drifting snow, and we'll have that layer of ice under the snow cover as well. So definitely keep that in mind. So what to do in those situations: avoid travel if possible, take it slow, and please do use extreme caution. So more on those road conditions out there. Let's get over to Tashara.
All right, thank you, Greg. Let me tell you something, guys. If you don't have to be out, please, I really can't stress it enough. This is the situation out off of 35E right at Loop 12. I talked to TxDOT here just before we came on the air. 75% of their cameras are down across the Dallas DFW Metroplex. So keep that in mind. The lights just went out. I watched the lights go out, and I started to see folks tapping the brakes even more so than they were already doing, trying to travel on these treacherous road conditions, as we've been calling it. So again, you guys, if you don't have to go out, please do not get out. Look at how dark it is out there on 35. This is right at Loop 12 South. Again, this is in Dallas. Take it easy if you do have to head into work this morning. Mark, out to you.
All right, thank you, Deshara. I want to get back to that breaking news we talked about at the top of the newscast. The state's power grid operator has declared its highest level of emergency, and they are now turning off electricity to hundreds of thousands of homes across the state. We have certainly heard from many of you on social media that have experienced that. I know Kara mentioned that as well. I think Kaylee Dion has gone through that too. Cleo Green joins us now this morning because we've been reporting the state wants people to conserve energy, Cleo, and we're seeing what happens when you have millions of people across across the state of Texas trying to stay warm.
Right, trying to stay warm. It is so cold out there, and right now people are waking up with power and their homes are extremely cold right now. This morning, Encore reporting that more than 836,000 customers do not have power right now, and this is because of those rotating power outages. So ERCOT, we've been talking about this for a few days. ERCOT says that they need to conserve really their electric grid. They control the entire electric grid in Texas, all right? So they contacted Encore overnight and said that they really need to start with these power outages, and they could last between 15 to 45 minutes. But a lot of people on social media, on Twitter, saying, Cleo, my power has been out since about 1:30 this morning. The thermostat says 50 degrees right now. It's very cold right now in their homes. And ERCOT is saying that this could last throughout this severe winter event. Once again, that number, 836,000 customers without power this morning. And this is across North Texas. Dallas, McKinney, Garland, Cedar Hill, Oak Cliff, Arlington, Fort Worth. It's across North Texas right now, y'all, and this could last throughout the next few days here. These rotating power outages to really try to conserve power. Hannah, some people waking up without power this morning, and then a lot of people saying, I'm looking out my window and I'm seeing a completely pitch black street. And Tashar just showing us the highway as well.
Yeah, good morning, Cleo. I actually just heard a viewer on Twitter who said they lost their power. Her father's on oxygen, trying to figure out who to call. We gave them that ERCOT Encore number. I also instructed her to reach out to a local fire department. So this really is a serious situation for a lot of people. Let's take a look at what it looks like this morning. Our photographer, Cody Markham, shot this video on his way into work this morning, and you can see parts of downtown, all of that power out, no lights, kind of an eerie sight with the snow coming down. Now, because of this, it is so important that we can conserve energy, so hopefully we get through this as quickly as possible. This is what experts say how we can do that. Number one, turn your thermostat to 68 degrees, but keep it above 55. Keep blinds closed so heat does not escape through the windows. Put towels down by the door so cold doesn't come through there. Also, try to avoid using any large appliances like a washer or dryer during peak demand times. That's both in the morning and evening. Now, these temperatures are bone chilling. Here are ways to stay warm safely. If you have a space heater, do not leave it on while you're sleeping. Never use an oven or a stovetop to heat your homes. Those are designed just to cook. And if you're using a fireplace, make sure it is clean and your smoke alarm is working, and same with carbon monoxide. Again, a lot of people are experiencing this. If you are, let us know. Tweet us, use the hashtag #IamUp. If you have questions for officials, let us know as well. We will take those questions to them. Chris, I know this is not just impacting people at home, the outages, but also the drive. What are you saying?
Yeah, Hannah, a little more than an hour ago, we were driving here into Deep Ellum, and we noticed right as we were about to hit the Deep Ellum area, the lights went out. That was more than an hour ago. You can see they are still out right now. We've kind of been driving around the area. Some streets immediately to the north and south where we are still have power, but right now, as we've been kind of driving through, you can see the fresh snow on the ground, but no lights. We have seen a few drivers out and about, not many. Of course, we want to make sure that you're being very careful out on the roads. Earlier today, we were driving through Plano, and a similar situation. We saw that the lights were out as a part of these rolling outages. Then they popped back on as we were passing through. We've been told that these outages would last anywhere 15 to 45 minutes. Of course, though, as I just mentioned, we're going on more than an hour here in Deep Ellum. Now, we did see one driver this morning. He was out and about. It looked like he'd been stranded. Certainly, if you do have to get out on the roads, you want to make sure that all your vehicle maintenance is up to date. Your levels, your antifreeze, your wiper fluid is all topped off. Also, plan in case you have a breakdown with food, water, blanket to keep warm if that very unfortunate thing happens to you. But hopefully you don't run into something like that. Hopefully you're not out on the roads at all. As we've been out, we've been taking it very slow this morning. As you see here in Deep Ellum, still the lights are out. Off in the distance, though, the downtown lights are on. So this is something that we will be monitoring throughout the morning. It's something that they said will last. ERCOT said would last throughout the morning and perhaps even longer as this winter storm plagues the area, something we're not used to, Kara.
Yeah, thanks for the perspective, Chris. Appreciate it. I know I drove about 15 miles an hour all the way into work. For the very latest on the outages and to check the Encore map, head over to WFA.com, or you can download our news app and upload pics so that we can see what's happening in your area. Let's get back over to Greg talking this morning about those very cold temperatures. That's what we're going to be left to deal with.
That's what we're going to be dealing with. The snow is tapering off for now across the area. We'll get back to that in just a sec, but let's talk about those temperatures. 6 above right now, heading out to the UNT campus there in Denton. Minus 13 is what it feels like with that wind chill. So look at these single digits all across North Texas now. 4 above in Fort Worth, 7 in Terrell this morning, 6 getting out to McKinney along with Greenville here early on. So yes, it is quite cold when you factor in those winds. Minus 13 in Denton, minus 15 getting over to Fort Worth right now, and minus 16 heading up to Sherman and Gainesville. So we do have that wind chill warning in effect, something that we've never had issued across North Texas. So that just tells you just how cold it is. And if her power stays on, Kaylee Dion's going to be in a little bit later to talk more about the historical impact that we're dealing with this stretch of wintry weather that we've had. And we'll keep those wind chills in the single digits, probably below 0 even, as we go through the rest of today. So yes, it is going to remain quite cold. Now again, the snow is tapering off for us as we look. It's cleared the Metroplex now, so it will continue to work its way on to the east as we go through the rest of the day. Getting into East Texas, still going to have some blowing and drifting snow, some heavier snow bands, but all that has tapered off for us. So we'll have some mostly cloudy skies, but the very cold temperatures not getting out of the middle teens for those highs a little bit later on today. So we'll talk more about that for you coming up, let you know when that next wintry system, weather system will move in. That's going to be in the midweek time frame. More on that in a few minutes. But now let's get back over to Deshara, checking on those roads.
All right, thank you, Greg. The roads are not good this morning, and you guys knew that this was coming over in Fort Worth. The good news is I haven't seen a whole lot of folks out there on the roadways. Completely clear by way of accidents over in Fort Worth, Mid-Cities, Grand Prairie, and Arlington. No active problems out there on the roadways other than, of course, the snow that we've been talking about that's out there on the roadways. I do see one small triangle that just popped up in Dallas. I'll try to check on that in a bit, but one of the things that I just learned from TxDOT is 75% of their cameras, the cameras that we use to track the incidents in and around Dallas DFW Metroplex, those cameras are down, and it's all due to those rotating outages that we have learned about from ERCOT this morning. I actually had this camera up on my system, 35E, right at Loop 12. It's one of the few cameras that are still working out there. This is over in the Dallas area, and I started to see folks tapping their brakes consistently, already tapping their brakes, of course, because they're trying to go well below the speed limit with the conditions on the roadways. But look at how dark it is out there. No one wants to drive in anything like this. So if you can stay at home, if it's not an emergency, if you're not an essential worker, certainly stay off the roadway. I'm not sure how long these rotating outages will last, but only 25% of those cameras are active right now. Kara, over to you.
Yeah, making the situation that much more concerning. Thanks to Shara. We have our snow edition of Reasons to Smile, so we're giving you a look at all the best parts, like this one here, of the winter weather across Texas. Good morning, Crum and all of North Texas. Speaking of reasons to smile, hopefully the snow is giving you plenty of those. For the most part, when you can stay at home, send us some pics and videos.
Saturday, February 20th, I'm Sonia Azad. Your top stories are coming up in just a moment, but first, if you are heading out of your house this weekend, don't expect to see completely white streets like earlier this week. This cobblestone ice and brown slush is slowly replacing all of that snow. Our Chris Sadeghi is out on the roads. We're going to check in with him on how the conditions are looking in a moment. But first, meteorologist Kyle Roberts is here. We finally get to shed some layers, maybe not totally put away the hats and the gloves and the boots.
Yeah, no, this afternoon is going to be way below normal for this time of the year, but it's also going to be the warmest we've been in about a week and a half or so here in North Texas, because the Arctic blast behind us as we are warming up, and that's good news. The melt is on here in North Texas. Cedar Hill, 30 degrees, looking way more brown than what it was yesterday when it was quite white, left over from the snow. Still 30 degrees, but with plenty of sunshine, probably going to warm up above freezing here within the next hour or so. And I have good news to report. DFW Airport now up to 33. So the melt is on out at DFW, and no looking back from here, and we'll continue to warm up as we head through the rest of the day today. Look at all these temperatures starting to hit that freezing point or even climb above it. 32 in Dallas, 31 in McKinney, 32 in Denton right now, Granbury, you're already up to 34 degrees, so everything should start to melt as we head through the next few hours here. If you do have to be out and about this morning, everybody I think will warm above freezing if you aren't already in the next hour, maybe 2 hours, but probably in the next hour. So that slush or melted ice did refreeze last night, but as we melt, that won't become as much of an issue. So still take it slow, take it easy, because you still have to, give it an hour or so before it can really start to melt. Or just wait till your temperatures are above freezing to head out the door this morning. Your temperatures will warm up. Those who are already above freezing at DFW will keep on climbing the rest of the day. Today, your highs will be in the upper 40s. That's about 10 degrees warmer than what we were yesterday. Will be a chilly evening, but that's way better than what we've been recently. Even warmer weather on the way as we end the weekend. I have rain. Don't worry, just rain on the 10-day. We'll talk about it coming up.
Just rain. All right, Kyle, thank you. From that cold weather this week that caused thousands of pipes to burst inside people's homes to all of the boil water advisories across the state, 14 million Texans still don't have fresh, clean drinking water. I want you to look at these lines. Check that out. Hundreds of people waiting just to get water. Gateway Church teamed up with the city of Southlake to give out free bottled water yesterday. So when will the water be safe to use? Okay, here's the deal. Governor Greg Abbott said it's really up to local water providers. First, they have to test the water to make sure it's safe. That can take up to 24 hours. But since so many systems have broken pipes, they need to do those repairs first to make sure that the water isn't being contaminated. Unfortunately, that's the step that could take a while. And more winter storm aftermath we're still dealing with, of course, those slick roads. It can be dangerous with all that snow turning to slush and cobblestone ice to drive or even walk, really. Chris Sadeghi has been out reporting all week and even this morning, Chris, pretty slick it looks like, even on those roads just around you.
Yeah, definitely. And we're right here in a section, kind of what we're talking about. When the snow first falls, it's pretty, it's clean, it's pristine. You can get out there, take pictures. Then after a few days, it gets slushy, gets dirty, gets gross. And then when it goes above freezing like it did yesterday, then back below freezing like it did overnight, you get the situation where all that slush kind of hardens. And like you said, it can be tough to walk on. This is like really solid there. It can also make it really bumpy when you're driving, make for a bumpy ride. Now this section here where I'm at isn't that bad, but it could be worse in other parts of the area. We've talked a lot about cobblestone ice. Want to show you kind of what that entails. It was really bad. You might remember it back in 2013. Causes for a bumpy ride, like I said. You can kind of see it here in this video. You might remember back then, though, in 2013, we stayed below freezing for a while, so we had to deal with that cobblestone ice for an extended amount of time. Fortunately, though, we're not expected to stay below freezing long today, so hopefully it's going to melt away much sooner. In fact, it feels good right now to have that big ball of fire in the sky beating down on us, warm us up a little bit. But you can't be lulled into a false sense of security because we do have some ice out on the roads. If you're out there driving, you'll run into situations like this. It can also make for that black ice situation where you won't necessarily be able to see it. It'll look like a dry road, but it will be slick. So drop your speed a little bit. Don't be in a hurry. If you can help it, try not to get out at all. Sonia, back to you.
All right, Chris, good advice. Thank you. It is 9:06. Time now for your morning rush. President Biden plans to sign a major disaster declaration for Texas. This is different from the emergency declaration before the storm. So this is going to allow other agencies to direct resources here in addition to what FEMA has provided. The president does plan to visit Texas. He's going to make those plans clear by Monday. Both police and fire crews were called to a home in Salina last night with reports of a shooting and a fire at the same home. When firefighters put out the flames, 3 bodies were recovered. A suspect is in custody this morning. We're waiting for further details as the investigation unfolds. Dozens of Texans have died in the cold, including this 11-year-old boy in Conroe, which is north of Houston. This video is from his family's final memories, playing in the snow for his first time ever. The boy died after 2 nights without power inside the family's mobile home. The funeral for Congressman Ron Wright will be held today after yesterday's public service at AT&T Stadium. He was the first active member of the U.S. Congress to die from complications of COVID-19. The Bishop of Fort Worth will preside over today's service at 11 o'clock at Will Rogers Memorial. It is open to the public. For those of you in need of food, Tarrant Area Food Bank is going to hold another giveaway. So this one is from 2 until 4 o'clock this afternoon at Herman Clark Stadium in Fort Worth. Friendship Baptist Church in Dallas is also providing food and hot meals tomorrow beginning at 10 a.m. That is your morning rush. Okay, so you lost power this week, but you might be paying more on your next electricity bill. This could be a real shocker. Jason Wheeler explains why in Right on the Money.
First came a winter blast, now comes a soaking of the money kind. We're going to hit on a few power-related financials. Let's start with this. You have a plan, but do you know what it is? When you signed up for electric service, you either got an indexed rate, a variable rate, or hopefully a fixed rate. Log on to your electricity account or find the paperwork so you can be sure. Here's why. There is a marketplace where electricity is bought and sold in bulk before it ever gets to most of us retail consumers. Now, with supply and demand so out of whack this week, the wholesale cost of electricity for 1 megawatt of power in Texas went from about $50 to $9,000. If you're on a fixed rate plan, what you pay per kilowatt hour isn't affected by that. If you're on an indexed or variable one, your rate can move with that market. Now, depending on how the plan is set up, some customers and even some electric companies are in for some sticker shock. One provider is even suggesting that our members switch to another provider with a fixed rate. Now, some have a much more difficult time changing their plans. Usually, we're talking about businesses that use a lot of power. It is a gamble with these flexible plans. They may have recently been paying about 3 or 4 pennies per kilowatt hour. Now it's closer to $2 or more. If rates like that keep up, a CEO of a Dallas electric brokerage told me that some businesses could actually go out of business just because of their next electric bill.
I've seen in the past, speaking for larger commercial customers or even small business, they go from a $15,000 bill to a $200,000 bill, and then next thing you know, they're going out of business.
Finally, if you didn't lose electricity, congratulations. Except if you have a heat pump system and one of those fancier screens for a thermostat, you may have seen it read emergency heating recently. That is a secondary heater that kicks in automatically, usually when the temps outside drop below about 30 to 35 degrees, and they've been well below that lately. Emergency heat does make the house nice and toasty again, but it eats up electricity, up to 50% more than your heat pump does. So if you kept your thermostat higher than the mid or high 60s, let's say, and emergency heat was running a lot, be prepared for a potentially big spike in your next electric bill. For those who lost power, sorry. And it still might cost you. I saw people whose indoor temperatures dropped to 24 degrees. Yeah, they weren't paying for electricity while it was off, but try heating a home from 24 all the way back up to 68. And a rule of thumb, each degree you add makes your heating cost rise by about 3%. Multiply that by about 44 degrees, and you see that the money you saved while you were shivering in the dark has now been spent, and maybe then some. So be prepared for the possibility of a higher than usual bill, even if you were in the blackout for a long time. I've got a lot more info and resources with today's post at Jason Wheeler TV. I can't keep you warm, but I am trying to help keep you right on the money.
Well, then there are nightmares like this in Arlington. Pipes bursting, homes flooding. Look, whether your home looks like this or you're hoping to prevent a pipe from bursting, here's what you need to know. If you detect a leak, turn off the water supply immediately. That can at least prevent any further damage while you get on the line with a good plumber. Now, the Insurance Council of Texas says you should document any leaks and repairs, take pictures of the damage, keep receipts from everything you spend, and get with your insurance agent to make sure you know exactly what's covered. Homeowners' policies can have varying levels of coverage for water damage. And those plumbers that we're talking about, boy, they are really working overtime right now. As of yesterday, more than 320 former plumbers had renewed their licenses to help out.